A standard band, I would say, is a group of people that all play instruments together. And so far, that sounds like a band we're talking about today, with the exception of the word people. We might need to swap that for characters, because this band consists of completely imaginary virtual characters. Though I say imaginary, the members think they're just as real as the rest of us, including backstories and everything. These characters only exist because of the artistic imagination of two men, Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett. Hello and welcome back to Melomaniax, the podcast where we take deep dives on some of the most popular musicians and bands of our time.
We work really hard over here to research every detail we can, and even listen to every song on every discography and compile some facts and opinions to help you learn more about music, even if it isn't your favorite genre.
If you want to support the work we put in, we'd appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, heart, and most importantly, give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate 5-star reviews on any platform, but the reviews help the most on Apple Podcasts as far as growth.
Yeah, for sure. Now, before we jump in, we forgot last episode to give our 5-star rating, or our rating out of 5, for the Doobie Brothers from episode 1. So, real quick, we're going to give you our ratings, and we're going to try not to forget going forward. So, Ashton, what was your rating for the Doobie Brothers out of 5? Let's hear it.
I'm giving them a 4.2 out of 5. Throughout just the evolution of their albums, the different singers, everything with it, I just enjoyed the entire discography of the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah, same. And I just went slightly lower. I gave them a 4 out of 5. I guess we don't really need to overly explain it. You can go listen to that episode for more of our in-depth thoughts and the breakdown on the Doobie Brothers and stuff. But so you're at a 4.2 out of 5. I'm at a 4 out of 5.
I expect you to always be slightly more conservative than me.
Yeah.
Being the
That's
you know
true.
the musician that you are.
That's true.
I feel like you'll have a higher
I don't know.
higher expectation.
I guess it's hard to kind of define and quantify something so subjective. But anyway, now that we got that stuff out of the way, let's jump into today's subject. So Ashton brought up Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett. That, of course, means we're talking about Gorillaz. But also Damon Albarn and his stuff with Blur. But mainly Gorillaz.
Yeah, so there's going to be a little bit of all over the place today, but we'll keep it in chronological order.
You know,
follow the timeline.
One thing I thought seeing Gorillaz, they're one of those bands that people would call the Gorillaz.
Yep.
But it's just Gorillaz. The only other one I can think of like that is Eagles.
Eagles.
Everybody says the Eagles, but it's just Eagles.
Same with Grateful Dead. I always type
That's
in
true.
the Grateful Dead. It's just Grateful Dead.
That's a good point.
People, it's so much easier to throw the in front of.
I want to keep a running tab on that as we get deeper into these episodes. Bands we discover that have that same kind of thing where people add the in front of it, and it might not be there. Or some bands it is there, like the Black Crowes or the Guns N' Roses. No, just kidding.
God, that sounds so awful.
The other thing, real quick side note that I love to keep track of is what I call a true supergroup. I don't know if we will cover this anytime soon, but it's fun to think about. Any band that I classify as a true supergroup is where every single member is from another band that was successful. Right. So, for example, Velvet Revolver, people would say is a supergroup because you have 3 of the guys from Guns N' Roses and Scott Weiland from Velvet Revolver. But you also have Dave Kushner, who just kind of came from nowhere. So I wouldn't classify them as a technical supergroup, even though, they are. But I love playing the technicalities.
What about Audioslave?
Yeah, see, that would count.
That would count. Okay.
3 members of Rage Against the Machine and Chris Cornell.
Yeah.
That definitely counts.
All right.
But if you threw in another guy that was just like me, it'd be then it wouldn't be. Dallas just ruined it.
Yeah. Get that guy out of here.
The other thing I like to track is how many bands have a song that's the same name as the album, that's the same name as the band. Right? So you have the band Bad Company off the album Bad Company has the song Bad Company. The band Metal Church off the album Metal Church has the song Metal Church. So when you pull it up on Apple Music, it's the same thing 3 times.
The same thing, all 3. Yeah.
There's a few of those. Iron Maiden, I think, is also one. But they're fun to track as well. But I'm getting off track. These are just fun things we can track as we go through Melomaniax. So let's begin with Damon's early life. Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah, way back to 1968. He was born March 23rd in London. His father was an artist and his mother was a stage designer. So he already had that artistic liberal background. And this plays a huge part in his lyrics for Gorillaz, and as well as Blur. He talks a lot about social, you know.
Just like all of his creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how he focuses his artistic energy. The double vowels is hard to back to back.
Yeah, that's hard.
Good job. But His parents used to treat Damon and his sister like they were adults, even from children. They would be allowed to attend parties their parents would host, which would include plenty of artists and all kinds of actors and basically anybody from the entertainment field in London. And the parties were just filled with all these performers and drugs. Of course, the kids didn't take part, they said, but they were just... They said in the book. And they were probably sneaking off to the closet.
Yeah, of course.
8 years old, snorting a line of coke.
The kids definitely weren't on drugs. I really was, so I couldn't tell you what the kids were doing. But was the kid there? Do I have a kid?
Yeah, so this played a huge part on Damon's young, impressionable mind.
Of course, yeah. So when Damon was 10, he would take a 2-month holiday with some family friends. And upon returning home, found that his family had moved to Colchester. How would you say that in British? Colchester, probably. Coaster.
How crazy to just show back home and your family's just gone.
Yeah.
Moved.
Yeah. But worth pointing out, that's a far more conservative town than London.
True. Damon found it hard at first due to his extrovert character in his new atmosphere, we'll say. Since attending school in Colchester, Damon began playing violin and piano and had a growing interest in acting and performing arts. Of course, inspirations from those parties. Damon seemed to attract people who had similar interests, so early on he had more interest in acting than music, but his music teacher always said he was very good at improvising on the piano, so they could see some music ability in his early childhood. And he meets Graham Coxon around this time, which is going to be a name that sticks around for a long, long time. He meets him by walking up to him and basically insulting his shoes, calling him cheap.
That's hilarious.
So there was a band. I can't remember the name of it. It wasn't a huge band, but it was a little British band that they had these special shoes, I believe the lead singer wore. And Graham was wearing like a knockoff brand. And Damon had the actual ones.
The real ones.
And walks up and like, you're wearing some cheap.
So he had the real Yeezys.
Exactly. And he walked up and was like, you're wearing that cheap shit. I got the real stuff.
That's funny. Also, not cool. So they, but they immediately found out they had a lot in common. So Graham played saxophone, drums, guitar, and they had the same taste in music, which was two-tone at the time. And fast became best friends.
That's the name of the band.
Yeah.
Two-tone. That's right. And so they immediately hit it off in the music part, and they began. Both became promising musicians at their school in orchestra, which is over there in England. They teach classic music in school.
That's awesome.
And so they eventually end up playing talent shows together, which would kind of lead to their first band Damon and Graham kind of put together. I think you have a story similar to this, but they grabbed like a
this all sounds really familiar.
They grabbed just a third guy that was supposed to come play, and then he bails out last second
exactly
on the
story,
stage.
yeah.
I know that's what it's so funny.
Except we had 6 guys and 1 bailed, which caused the other 3 to bail, and then it was just 2 of us left.
Yep. So that shows the obvious who actually cares about playing music, who actually has interest.
Yeah.
But they ended up covering Jimi Hendrix's "Hey Joe" at that.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Just the 2 of them, and
a classic.
It was a big hit.
Early like guitar player, like let's play a song. Like that's one of the ones.
Yeah, that's
great song.
Great song.
It's got the do 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 do. It's such a good riff.
Yeah, so Damon's instructors were always extremely frustrated with Damon because he had so much talent and potential, but lacked self-discipline to hone any of it in.
I know a few people like that.
So he always, as far as they said with the improvising, he could just sit down on the instrument and wow them. And then just, they would tell him, you should work on that, really focus in. And he's just that, whatever. I'm just going to do me.
Yeah, for sure.
Just
the artist.
Classic being also a kid.
Yeah, that's true. So just despite, any lack of discipline, he always managed to get by, So Graham decided to focus on art a little more seriously and transferred to the North Essex School of Art for a 2-year foundational course. So the duo was broken up for now, but they will reunite later. So meanwhile, Damon chose to attend a drama school to focus more on his interest in performing arts. And while at this new school, Damon met a new musical friend in Eddie Deedigan.
Yes.
Got it.
Deedigan.
That's cool. I've never heard that last name. They shared an interest in the same writers and musicians. So
the two would basically do every school project together. So Damon almost just subbed Graham out for this guy.
Yeah.
In the meantime.
Graham too.
Yeah, Graham too.
Just calls him Graham and everything. He's like, my name's Eddie. Like, no, you're Graham.
Yeah. And so a lot of the school projects they had in the drama school, they like to involve music, even if music wasn't exactly required in the project.
Mm-hmm.
So they always incorporated a musical number within their performances.
Right.
So music always sticks with Damon, even when he's doing his performing. And he really started to come into his own as a piano player around this time. And as an actor, they just described him as interesting.
Which is what people say to be polite.
Yeah, so here's the exact description. He's shown not as a great actor, just as an immense personality. It was a combination of his looks, age, voice, and so he became pretty well known around campus.
Yeah. Eddie was, although working on his career as a musician. So his first band split up when he enrolled in the drama school. But he had already agreed to play a final gig during his first semester. And it was opening for one of his favorite performers, Nico, who was a former member of the band Velvet Underground.
What a name.
What a name.
Eddie wanted to replace a member of the band with Damon for the gig. So they cut a girl who had an overpowering voice that just didn't mesh with the material. When Damon sat down and listened to one of Eddie's original, he immediately told that Eddie and the other guitar player were playing in different keys, made some adjustments to his song, and instantly made it better. And
yeah.
Eddie was just like, wow, this guy just told me how to play my song that I wrote and made it better instantly.
Yeah. So the gig was a success, and at the end, Damon's allowed to play a solo song. It was a sad ballad called The Rain. Of course, Damon blew the crowd away. Even with most people preferring pop at the time, the piano composition with the vocals was captivating. So Damon's largest inspiration was classical music, because that's kind of what he was studying in school at the time.
And after school, Damon takes odd jobs to afford to pay for demos and booze. Gets big into drinking around this time. Mainly booze. He gets fired a lot for fooling around, just really not taking any job seriously. Just caring way more about playing the music and recording demos than actually showing up and working a job.
Sure.
And around this time, he makes a band called Circus. And they had issues forming a consistent lineup until he calls his old pal Eddie to join. Eddie's reluctant at first because he doesn't like the material, and Damon shows him some of the new demos and new songs that he's been writing, and Eddie falls in love with that, so he joins the band. They recruit a few more members and hit the studio to learn Damon's material with hopes of recording an album. Everything's going well until 2 days before the official recording, and they lose a member, and things are looking grim.
Yeah. But Damon decides to call an old saxophone player he knew to step in. A few days later, who shows up? Graham Coxon, in the studio as the new guitarist. So Graham is back.
After recording the album, the band invited a few friends over to listen to the album. One friend in particular, Alex James, responds to the album by saying, "That's shit."
Nice.
Exactly.
Very British of him.
Which is hilariously honest and kind of awesome, because most people would lie, to be honest. Yeah. Nobody wants to actually give true criticism to their friends when it comes to art.
That's a good point.
And so Damon and Eddie weren't even offended. They looked at it the way I just said. They were impressed that he had the nerve to say exactly how he felt.
Yeah. Something I noticed when asking for feedback from people is the only time you know you're getting honest feedback is if they have the tone of surprise. If somebody's like, yeah, man, it's great. It's not great. If they're like, whoa, dude, wow, that's really good. Then it's like, oh, okay, that is actually good. You have to listen for the tone of surprise, especially with, with really anyone, but friends and family especially, because for whatever reason they default. It's just a human thing. They just default to thinking it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, and that's because
it probably was. And
I don't know. For a while, it is bad.
Gotta be, yeah.
Unless somebody really stands out. And
that's the thing nobody ever really talks about, is it has to be bad before it's good, right?
Yeah, I remember Ed Sheeran talking about that.
There's a funny video of him singing playing one of his old recordings, and it's just terrible.
It's god-awful.
He does and it's like cracks and stuff. But the thing is, if you cut someone down when they're in that growth stage where it's not good, of course it's not good. But if you cut them down too early, then it will never get good.
So you have to give them honest feedback, but you need to layer in positives. Yeah. That's the key, is yes, you can be negative with some criticism, but you need to layer in positives to keep them encouraged.
And the thing I'll add to that is that isn't going to come productively from someone who's outside of what you're doing, right? So like if I'm a musician and my family's not, I shouldn't be asking them for feedback. I should be asking my instructors and other bands and other people that are higher and farther and better along than me, because they're going to be the ones that can hear and be like, okay, you're not there yet, but this is good. This is keep focusing. You need mentors and stuff in that way. Exactly. You just ask your dad. He's like, it doesn't sound good to me. I don't know. Yeah. But that's not helpful, Yeah. So they were, in this case, just impressed that he, was straight up enough to just be like, that's shit.
Yeah.
So they used it as encouragement to get better and keep grinding out demos and working together in the studio.
However, the new material Damon brought to the table along this process started to push Eddie and the bass player towards their limits, and eventually Eddie and his bass player said it's too far for them and they were out. And so, devastated by the loss of two members, Damon, Graham, and Dave, they had two Daves at this time. I just didn't feel like mentioning the other Dave since he was there for no amount of time.
Right.
They were faced with finding a new member, and they actually bring in Alex James, the guy who said, "That's shit."
Nice.
And
that shit, you need me.
And funny enough, he was shit on bass, and they knew it, but he was confident and had great stage presence and had a good look. And so, and this is just the embodiment of bass doesn't matter for them,
right?
Even though it totally does. And so I kind of found that funny. He kind of learned on the go, as far as he just had like the basics and just kind of learned it.
For sure.
I bet that was so frustrating for producers in the studio.
Yeah. They're just like, dude, your look doesn't matter in here.
Yeah, exactly.
How confident your stage, nothing they chose you for matters in this particular instance.
Yeah. And so with the new lineup, they got rid of the old name Circus,
which was terrible.
Oh yeah. And
they come up with a new name.
They come up with this other name, and I was just having to put my brain together because, God, how do you get to this point? But I think I said it's probably top 10 worst band names of all time.
So we talk about band names on this podcast a lot, and we will continue to. And my running theory, that there is no good band name and they all suck. And we can go into that more and more. But Ashton thinks this might be in the top 10 worst band names of all time. Seymour.
Seymour.
Seymour. Seymour.
That word has never sounded appealing.
No.
Not even as a name of a person.
No, it's that joke. Like
Seymour
you
Butts.
write. Yeah, that's the first thing I think of. Seymour Butt. Yes, ridiculous, like kid's joke. But, however, they play with a band while doing shows that might have an even worse name, and that is Dandelion. Imagine that poster. Dandelion with special guest Seymour.
I'm not going.
You're looking at that. Tickets are free. Please take them. We'll pay you $10 a ticket
to come see.
I'm still not going.
So Seymour goes on to play about 10 successful gigs and land themselves a record deal with some conditions.
With some conditions. Can I guess the first condition?
Go for it.
They need to change their name.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes.
The record deal was like, the record execs were like, hey man, you guys are great except for one thing.
Got to get rid of that name. So the conditions were they needed a name change, they had to sign to a world rights deal, and the drummer had to stop wearing pajama bottoms while playing on stage.
Yeah. All right. Classic drummer move. Yeah, I'm surprised he's wearing bottoms at all, being a drummer.
Yeah.
Usually it's just,
It doesn't matter what
they
the
have the
drummer
least
does.
clothes for some reason.
Yeah.
So,
except for Flea. Well,
that's true.
I feel like the Red Hot Chili Peppers just have a competition who can wear the least amount on stage.
Yeah. Did you see the 99 Woodstock documentary? He just comes out just ass naked. Dick hanging. Dick just flopping in the wind. Yeah.
Who did?
Flea.
Flea? Oh, yeah. That's such a Flea thing. I mean, how many times do you see those dudes just with socks over their dicks or just naked?
No sock in sight.
In a lot of...
play an hour that way.
Jeez, man. How comfortable are you?
I was going to say, dude, the confidence is just otherworldly.
I guess the bass
it's covering it most of the time. Yeah. But
So
he comes out and pulls the bass up and just flaps it everywhere in front. Couldn't do that these days.
That's so Red Hot Chili Peppers.
So the band narrowed their name choice to a few different options. We had The Shining Path, terrible. Whirlpool, somehow worse, also a hot tub brand. Sensitize, spelled of course the British way, and Blur. So they narrowed it down to Blur pretty quickly because honestly, out of those four, that's the best one. That's the least worst one.
Yeah, it's not even the best. It's just
the least worst. That's the best you can hope for with a band name. We just have to get something that's not the worst. So all that was left was to get rid of the pajama pants, which Dave reluctantly agreed to.
Of course.
Yeah.
Signing over.
He put him on his head.
Slow signature. Just
All right.
angry looks around the room.
Sellouts, dude.
Yeah. We're sellouts, man.
I don't think so. Just put on real pants.
Have you had to have a conversation like that with any band members?
Sure.
As far as stage presence?
Sure. How about the time we had a professional photo shoot planned and our singer, now ex-singer for obvious reasons, showed up in flip-flops, shorts, and had no outfit changes, nothing.
Oh.
The rest of us are there like, dude.
I don't want to...
And then he got mad at us.
I don't want to rag on anybody, but that's called not being a professional.
It's not. That kind of sums up the whole thing, though. But that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
We should do the podcast on my band one day.
I was thinking we could do that someday for sure.
I'm actually authorized to talk about it, or like an authority on the subject.
Exactly.
It
would be funny if you made me do the research.
I know. There's no research.
But I would have
all
to,
the research in my head.
Yeah, I'd have to interview you.
There's no book.
Maybe I'll just write a bunch of questions and I'll interview you about your band. We could do it on
amazing.
like a bonus episode or something.
That'd be really funny. So Blur wanted to record. Blur, love it. And release a single right away. But the label thought it would be better to do a small 4-week tour to get a small fan base established, which honestly, listening to that now, that makes sense. These days it would be, a social media campaign or something like that. But
yeah.
at the time this was going on, a small 4-week tour around the UK, especially, which is a small country, you can cover the whole thing. You can cover every inch of that country in 4 weeks. We did it in 2. So you can, really get some fans going that way. So this is actually a smart move, I think. So the band hit the road and played a few medium-sized venues. That's actually impressive. I would have expected tiny little rooms with 6 people there.
They always seem to outperform their position, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like throughout their entire
That's crazy.
history. Yeah, I don't know how some of these bands just seem to get lucky breaks. I don't know how else to call them. Yes, their skill. And
we have bands like Motley Crue and Kiss and Wasp who all got kind of big based on antics and less on music. I was reading a book about just the 80s metal scene, and when everyone's talking about Motley Crue, they talk about everyone unanimously agreed they were not good. Their music wasn't good. They didn't play it good. But they were just like lighting shit on fire and like throwing beef into the crowd, and like they were just like, "You guys are awesome!" Like, oh my god. So I guess that's kind of what was happening here, because Damon's stage antics were at an all-time danger level. So he'd be climbing on speakers, light rafters, anything on stage, really. The venues hated it. The crowds loved it. Yeah, there's always that kind of thing going on.
That's just how it goes.
Yeah, I was gonna say this next thing. It caused some venues to cancel on Blur. And it even caused ticket sales to go crazy at the shows they did play. So you simultaneously have this, like, Blur is causing all sorts of problems with the venues, but that's making people want to go. So what does a venue do in that situation? Because they have to, decide. Are they going to bring in this wild man that could cause property damage, potentially do illegal things like fire? Any sort of pyrotechnics and things like that you have on stage have to be, I don't know about this time and I don't know about the UK, but in America these days you have to have full, vetting, fire marshals, everything has to be like up to code, all that good stuff. Because some crazy stuff has happened. For example, Metallica's James Hetfield was standing too close to a fire explosion thing and burned his whole arm and had to get someone else to play guitars. Ridiculous. There's all sorts of crazy things that have happened. Michael Jackson, I think, had something similar happen when he was shooting a commercial, and that's part of the reason that caused like his perceptions of his face and all that stuff. That's a whole different thing. We should do Michael Jackson at some point. But Damon said he thinks people were coming to shows just to see if he would kill himself. That's one way to attract attention to your band. And you know what? Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder did similar things. He would climb up the top of like big towers, jump off, crazy stuff. So.
I didn't know that. I always just know them for just getting absolutely trashed on stage.
Yeah.
As far as...
For sure.
Nowadays, I guess he shows up with a full bottle of wine instead of beer.
That's hilarious.
That's what I hear.
He shows
older
up with,
now. Literally walks out with a bottle of wine.
He's just like an older alcoholic.
Exactly. He just grew up.
Yeah.
Kind of.
For sure. So,
that's so funny.
So that's kind of where Blur found themselves. And that's a similar thing. We hear that with Motley Crue, all those bands I listed. So baggy, which is a British alternative dance genre, is what Blur was getting labeled as being similar to, which I don't know that I agree with. And it's not the look they wanted. So continues to be an issue with the band and the media for a little bit of time after that.
Damon fights with the media all the time about this.
It sounds like an Axl Rose thing.
It is. He's definitely the
newer coming on.
He just plays the front man so well with the media and always just saying blasphemous things. And
It's kind of cool.
It's good. It gives them attention when you come out super arrogant and just in the interviews, it just gets attention for your band, whether it's positive or negative. Just like they always say, all publicity is,
all press is good press. Yeah,
exactly. And so the band makes, speaking of these, the band makes 3 incredibly arrogant public statements around this time. Now, keep in mind, they haven't even released a single song. Not even a single has come out.
Nobody knows what, and actually that 4-week tour was really smart then, if they knew that, if the record label had any inkling that that's what was going to go down, which I bet they did.
Yeah. So the first statement was that the band would not release a single until they had secured the front page of a weekly music paper.
Okay.
Number 2, they had no intentions of playing small, shitty venues for the next 5 years.
Which is really funny because every band's going to play small, shitty venues, and you just called all of them shitty, so now they're not going to be excited to book you.
Exactly. So they said their time is now.
Right.
We're playing large venues.
We're going to be at
now.
the O2 tomorrow.
Yes.
Also, our first song's coming out next week.
And number 3, they said, as for the release of their first album, why rush it? They're going to be huge anyways.
Mm-hmm.
God.
Yeah.
Man.
Didn't really turn out to be true, though. There would you count Blur as a one-hit wonder?
I wouldn't actually.
That's true, because I'm coming from the American perspective.
Yes, they do.
Over here, they were one.
They do way better in the UK, obviously. In fact, you'll hear, I think, 5 or 6 albums in a row of theirs enter the charts at number 1.
That's cool.
Because it's just, the UK is like, Blur new album.
Perfect.
Gonna buy it. Gonna listen. They
Oi, bruv. Blur's got a new album, eh?
Yeah. Perfect. That's exactly what happened.
Word for word.
But that's literally what they said. Incredibly confident or arrogant, we'll let you decide.
Yeah.
And then this comes from Damon's just giant personality. He's usually always the one in the interviews. He's the mouth for the band.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. The writer, the creative force. Yeah.
Yeah. And always overly confident throughout, even nowadays.
If you're a rock and roll frontman, you kind of need that, though.
Yeah, you need a little bit of it.
You can't be a shy, I guess that's more of like a indie thing, where you're the shy, quiet, beta boy in the back.
Yeah, I was just trying to come up with an example.
Man, I'm just not really confident in my ability, It's like, shut up.
Yeah.
Have some. Do you want to be here? So Damon's the opposite of that.
Do you want to be a star?
He's coming out loud and
not
proud.
Really.
Yeah. No, I'm good back here with my guitar.
So they continue to play shows.
My British accent's terrible, by the way. I know it is. Which is funny because my girlfriend is
I was just about to say, how's it not gotten better?
Yeah. Somehow it gets worse.
Maybe
I can only say one thing. You ready? Oi, bruv.
Oi, bruv.
That's it.
And
the South London accent.
South London. I was going to say, I don't know how to break down the different,
they're all over the place. There.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like we have accents all over America, they have accents all over.
Yep. But to our ears, Americans, it just sounds British, which is funny. The Blur episode, we probably have a lot of Brits listening. Anyway, Blur continued to play shows, sell shirts, attract attention. Less than 4 months after their signing, they earned the cover of a weekly cover. Sounds. Boom. Yep. Nice. That's one of their 3 arrogant statements. Check. Done. Check. Stating they were one of Britain's best new bands.
And Blur released their single She's So High, which did decent on the charts, hitting number 48 on the UK chart list. Mm-hmm. The single landed a bunch of single of the week slots and a bunch of papers. So nice. The name Blur kind of just made its way around.
Logo kind of makes itself too. Just blur it out, right?
Blur it out.
Nice.
Just write the name and blur it.
Every picture done.
Every picture of the band just kind of blurry.
Yeah. They took their sweet time releasing their second single, though. It was called There's No Other Way. It came out 6 months after She's So High. Many thought this was too large of a gap and that the band would be old news, but There's No Other Way still hit number 8 on the charts. It's really annoying when someone so arrogant is also right.
Right? That's the worst part about this.
That's what I'm getting this from here. Is like, God damn it.
When I was researching, I was like, this arrogant fuck. And then get a little further in my research. And, oh my God.
He nailed it.
He predicted the future.
I think he's Nostradamus. One thing to note about Blur songs, though, is in the beginning, they were just lyrically horrible. It was something Damon didn't put much effort into at the time. And it's interesting how now he's kind of become known for his lyric writing after kind of suffering for so long.
Yeah, it was more so about the music and the performance.
So you know my theory on band names.
Yes.
I have a similar theory on lyrics. I think good lyrics are incredibly rare.
They really are.
I think so many big famous songs we all know are just absolutely dumb or mean nothing. For example, a great example is I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys. I defy you to tell me what that song's about. Like, it makes no sense.
He wants it that way, man.
Yeah, it was written by Max Martin, who we need to do an episode on him. He's not an artist, he's a songwriter. And the only people that have more number one singles than Max Martin in the world for all time is Paul McCartney and John Lennon. So he's one of the top songwriters, well, I guess the second top songwriter of all time ever. And he did a lot of the Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, all that kind of stuff. But he's Swedish, I think, somewhere up in that area. So his English, at the time of starting wasn't perfect. So I think that was part of why some of those songs don't make a ton of sense.
But didn't translate well.
It just goes to show you that melody, I think, in my opinion, and I think it's proven in history, is more important than lyrics.
Oh, for sure. The feel of a song is the most important thing.
That's why Kiss can get away with being lick it up. Lick it up. Like you're singing it, screaming it, fire's going everywhere. You're, like, it's nothing to that. There's no lyrical profoundness there.
They're just entertaining.
For sure. So Blur's third single, Bang, would not really find much success. So, stalling out at number 24 on the charts. Apparently, there were numerous critiques about the song, but one is that it was apparently written in 15 minutes. Kind of impressive if that's true. Sometimes that does happen. Great songs can come out really quickly.
Yeah, that's
bad songs come out quickly. Slow. It doesn't matter. Everybody thinks there's like some rule. It's every song is different. Like some songs will come out. Boom.
Some hits are written really quickly.
Yeah, and some aren't, and some. There's anything, there's no like rules or exceptions. It's just kind of anything goes,
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons the lyric writing wasn't incredible. Most of the songs Damon admitted to just sitting down and writing in 15 to 30 minutes just to throw some lyrics on top of the music.
Right.
And so it's good that ends up evolving. But late August of 1991, Blur's first album, finally, titled Leisure, would be released, and it did okay in the sales at first, but the album quickly overshadowed by Nirvana's Nevermind, which released 1 month later. How unfortunately timed for them.
Yeah, because they would have had no idea,
Yeah, and two completely different. So they were blown up in the UK, but then Nevermind just worldwide famous. And so they had like 1 month of good sales, and the sales continued to trickle on, but grunge just kind of smashed that band.
I wonder if they had the foresight to realize grunge was going to be a fad, in the same way that 80s metal was a fad, in the same way that boy bands were a fad. We see it all the time. Nobody wants to admit they're in a fad when it's happening, but it is. There's literally a lyric in NSYNC's Dirty Pop, which is one of their last albums, I think. I don't remember what the album was called, but the song's called Dirty Pop. He goes, then you got to realize what we're doing is not a trend. And it's like, well, yeah, it was, because this was over right after this.
Yeah.
So that didn't work. Justin Timberlake obviously went on to be successful, but the boy band thing,
you have to
be able big for a bit, and then it was gone.
You have to be able to evolve. And little spoiler for the next episode, researching Taylor Swift, and she came out as a country artist, and now she's the largest pop artist. And same with a band that we love, Train, who kind of came on as sort of country sounding and also evolved into more of a pop sound. Their sound evolves over time, but it always stays good. The band, and
that's true. Although I would say Train's probably gone down in terms of commercial success.
But if you're a fan of the band, I'd say if you're a fan of the band, I think they've stayed good. And also, there's just great whimsical lyrical writing by Pat.
Great. Yeah,
he's actually one of the few lyricists that is really good.
I think so. Sometimes he has some silly stuff, but most of the time his lyrics are just
they're quirky and and relatable, and but anyways, unlike
So anyway, they're fighting Nevermind, which that's a losing battle. So there was obvious potential in Blur, but their lazy lyric writing and weak bass playing needed adjusting. So good thing the band's live shows around London were always a hit. You can get away with having one bad member in the band at a live show way easier than in a recording studio. So
and that's where Alex came up.
That's the thing about the studio, man. You can't hide. Every weakness you have comes out so fast, and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, it's a problem when the producer has to call in a guy, or the producer themselves has to get in there and
the producer will do it, and sometimes they'll do it and you didn't know they do it.
Yeah,
they'll let you leave, and they'll let you leave and be like, great job, man, and then they're like, I'm playing all this.
I gotta fix this.
Yeah, for sure.
So the album had a follow-up tour that was a sellout, and it was well received. Unfortunately, the time on the road caused the band to become a shell of its former self, with band members fighting all the time, endless drinking, undisciplined behavior. This always seems to happen to bands early on. And they all even comment that they would get into fist fights with each other on the regular. That's a whole next level of fighting.
That's bad, yeah.
You know, people yelling at each other, but also they were just 100% drunk all the time. And I guess they were aggressive drunks.
Sure.
Which is weird, though, because they all look like really small, skinny guys. I can just imagine just like little light slaps and stuff.
Yeah, it's like little love taps.
Exactly. Sorry about that. My throat was throating. But they had to get the amateur stuff out. The record label was not having that kind of behavior, which typically you need some cohesiveness, and if your band is fighting each other all the time, that can't stand. So
no, that's a ticking time bomb for sure.
Yeah. And so that tour also included some American venues, and this was the band's first time in America, which is also why the fighting gets really bad, because their time in America was not well received. They were touring with this British sound during grunge being the biggest thing, and so the audience wasn't very into their music. They were not having a great time. And honestly, when you're performing it you really want to feed off the crowd's energy. And when the crowd's not into it, it's really hard to get into it as a member, at playing your instrument. It's
for sure.
Because
you got to feed off that. It's kind of a symbiosis,
Exactly. And so the crowd wasn't into it, and they were fighting. They weren't at home. You're unfamiliar territory, and it was just a really bad time for them. And they were just drinking so much, and they would just get onto the stage just already plastered. And a couple of shows, they were so drunk they couldn't even play and had to cancel the show. And that's not a good look, which this is their intro to America. So that's why I think it's hard for them to ever gain traction in America, is just that intro was so bad. And
that's a good point.
And so what is it? First impressions are everything, right?
Yeah, that sucks too, because that's something completely in your control. And it's also just like if people bought tickets, even two people bought tickets, like they deserve what they bought a ticket for. Exactly. It's not their fault no one else came. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And so meanwhile in Britain, Blur knocked off a band called Suede, or Blur got knocked off by a band called Suede. So they were in America, and so Suede sneaks in and kind of steals the UK's hearts a little bit, and kind of earned the title of Best Young Band out of Britain. And this would kind of form a mini rivalry between the two. And so they would trash each other on media outlets all the time. Yeah. Drama's just great for business. Just ask Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue.
Yeah. The famous Vince Neil punching Izzy situation.
Yep. I mean, once again,
and Axl threatening to kill Vince Neil.
All press is good press.
Yeah.
And
it's like, guys, you play guitar for a living. Relax.
Yeah, chill out. It's not that big a deal. And then at kind of a welcome show, Blur played a few shows with some other bands, including their favorite buddies, Suede.
Of course.
So,
also,
of course,
horrific name.
Suede.
These one word names, it's got to be a damn good word, and they haven't found it yet. So by the time Blur made it to the stage, they were absolutely plastered. So Damon starts off by telling the crowd, "We're so fucking shit, you may as well..." Wait, hold on. "We're so fucking shit, you may as well go home now." I kind of had it for the first half. From what it sounds like, most people did. Yeah, I would be like, "Yeah, man, I'm out." Like, cool.
Right?
Like,
I really don't want to hear.
Suede's way better. Just say that as you leave.
So this is actually, after this performance, this is when the label actually kind of confronts them. Yeah. Like I said, about, you got to get it together.
Yeah. And that was similar to the Doobie Brothers from last episode as well.
Yeah, exactly. That, you guys are doing a little too much drinking and not enough music.
Yeah.
And literally they weren't even able to play their instruments. So the label gave them 1 month to get it together.
Yeah.
And so Blur could only really go up from here. That was kind of the bottom.
Right.
So the band tried to repair itself, and they went up to Maison Rouge to start writing their second album, called Modern Life is Rubbish.
Hilarious. Are they 14?
Yeah, right.
My mom won't let me eat Cheez-Its. That was the first single.
I think they're all about like 21, 2-ish around this time. So the album ends up faring worse than their debut album. 3 of the songs were recorded with a producer that had a disastrous time with the band. He just couldn't get anything from them.
Just pure dysfunction at this point.
So they end up replacing and getting another producer.
Because that was the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so they do take a couple songs from the previous producer. So they record a couple and just only stick with like 1 or 2.
Right.
And they finally get an album together with the new producer, and the label says you need 2 singles. None of these can be released as singles. And so literally the next day, Damon wrote 2 songs that would be used as the singles. Yeah. So in one night, and comes back the next day with
For Tomorrow and Chemical World. Both songs would go on to hit number 28 on the UK charts. More notably, these songs actually had more meaningful lyrics, and Damon was finally getting noticed for his lyrical work. So he wasn't writing anything groundbreaking, but it was significantly better than their previous work. So he's starting to kind of come into his own as a songwriter.
Yeah. And so the album ended up getting released May of 1993. And the album's reviews were critically mixed, although there was some progression. The band sounded like all their influences, but it didn't sound unique. So they attributed being inspired by a bunch of bands. And the issue was they sounded too much like those bands and not anything unique, if that makes sense. So they wanted, it's fine to be inspired by somebody, but you have to put a twist on it. You can't just come out sounding exactly like them.
Right.
And so sales did okay, but not nearly as good as their previous album. It sold, and this always stays true, it sold conservatively but persistently. So it's they never spike much, but it just slowly trickles sales.
Yeah. So as 93 transitioned to 94, grunge was still the front runner in the music scene. However, Suede was creating a bit of resistance, keeping British pop alive. Blur was holding on to the same threads as Suede. They're both kind of trying to keep that British pop, that Brit pop, alive. However, this would all change with the release of a new single, Girls and Boys. The song would hit number 5 on the charts. Damon was starting to separate himself from his peers as a lyricist with this song. Unfortunately, the song's hype wouldn't last when the news of Kurt Cobain's suicide took over the world. So that would have been, 96?
Those pesky Nirvana.
Yeah. Always
taking their shine.
He's just like, come on, man. You did it on purpose, didn't you? The follow-up single was To the End, which peaked at 16 on the charts. The third single released was Park Life, which was able to hit number 10. And the final single released was End of a Century, though this song was thought of as a disappointment, only landing at 19 on the charts. This is the best performing group of singles the band has had up to this point. Though the singles were successful, the album's success would land Blur on the map forever. Park Life released in April of 94. Wait, Kurt Cobain died in 94 or 96? 94, I think.
90, yeah.
It will end up going 4 times platinum. So Park Life was the best album of the year and up there for best of the decade. Blur defined the Britpop scene with this release. It entered the charts at number 1 and stayed in the top 20 for 90 weeks. That's insane. Yep. Blur finally found the success that Damon had been mouthing off about in interviews. Blur was in the limelight, and they went on to play tons of shows around London.
So Blur was still promoting their recent album when they started writing the songs for the next album. So what was it? Modern Life is Rubbish kind of just gets blown over and then immediately into Park Life, which is the album, like we said, that puts them on the map. Yeah. And
so their third album, really.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's
their third album.
Their third.
Yeah. So it's hard to keep up with because of how quickly it's glossed over. Yeah. They immediately start promoting Park Life and grinding out tons of demos. And by early 1995, they had already 30 demos to work with. Mm-hmm. And so the band filtered through their list and selected their first singles. And this is after Park Life. They just move next to next. They have a real issue, and I don't know if this comes down to the record label or the band, but they release an album and it seems like they're so quick to get on to the next one that they don't spend the proper time promoting the previous album. And so I don't know. I guess that comes down to the band management.
Yeah, PR, marketing, any of those. The label, that would be the label's kind of responsibility. Well, I don't know about then, but now.
Oh, I gotcha. So they start going through all their demos to put some singles together for their next album. And the first single is Stereotypes, which was going well till a new rival band, Oasis hits the scene and
Not
released
a terrible name.
Yeah,
if you're going to go with a one-word name, that's a good word.
That is. It has a good ring to it.
Yeah.
And
so far, I think it's the least bad band name I've heard. And so, especially in this episode.
Especially in this one. This one is full of... I didn't even list all the band names that I came across doing the research.
So bad. But Oasis had released their new single, Roll With It, like you said. So it would, both bands would kind of take turns releasing new pop songs into what the papers called the Battle of Britain. So that's kind of good for both bands. They get that kind of free press, like you were saying.
Yeah, so you got to win with the timing, I guess. So their first single gets overshadowed by Oasis's big single, and then
it seems like timing is not Blur's strong point.
No, they get absolutely dumpstered by timing all the time.
That's so funny.
And it's stuff that's out of their hand,
right? Just complete control. That sucks. Shit luck,
And so it was very back and forth. Oasis released their new album in 1995 alongside Blur's album, The Great Escape. And prior to its release, the album had 4 singles that would land the charts in the top 10. The songs were Country House, The Universal, Stereotypes, and Charmless Man. And The Great Escape released September of 1995, and it would end up selling more than 1 million copies by the end of October. Ended up going triple platinum in less than a year.
Wow.
And Blur's 4th studio album was a huge success that sent him on another large tour.
Nice.
So it started seaside with some unique and small venues as a warm-up for the national arena tours. So So it was just like very small. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like small venues.
Yeah, small venues.
To get started, you build it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then they ended up just playing arena tours after that. So what a transition.
Yeah.
And so they had made it to the peak basically as British entertainers, and their tour went from Europe to Japan and to America, and then a random festival in Brazil, I believe, to end things.
Nice. Was it Rock in Rio?
I'm not sure. I think it was called something else.
If so, that's a huge one.
Yeah, no, Rock in Rio is huge.
That's massive. But I don't know if that was that. But
yeah. But even with them becoming the biggest thing in Britain, they were still having issues catching on with the American crowd. Their rivals, Oasis, were finally able to win the American masses by constant touring over there. So they just put in the actual work to get America to like them. And Blur, just from the lack of success, just really didn't want to spend much time over there.
Yeah, that's got to be rough for sure.
Yeah, focus on what you're good at, I guess. And the issues in America caused the British media to sense something wrong with Blur, and the rumors of a split started to arise pretty quickly, and it spread like wildfire just because of the poor success in America and Oasis's success. So because of that, Oasis wins the American people, and because of that, it makes them the biggest band in the UK.
And that feels like there's a point on Blur's story there. Well, boop. That was it. We tried,
right?
It feels that way.
And so somewhere in this time, the genre known as Britpop, which you alluded to, has basically completely died.
Yeah.
And Damon gets credited with the killing of it, the Mercy killing, I guess. And he had been quoted saying things like Britpop is dead, and if any bands are still trying to put that kind of music out, their future won't be bright. So he was calling the fad.
Right.
Basically saying it's ending, and if you're trying to get on the fad, you're going to fail. And he was growing so tired of the Britpop talk, and it was getting brought up in every interview. They just kept calling his band like Britpop, this. And so he decided to step out of the limelight, took up a role in a movie. The movie was called Face, and thankfully for Damon, it didn't flop. But what it did do is make Damon completely decide acting wasn't for him. So he had never lost, interest in the acting. And this kind of just solidified that, I'm gonna stick with music. And he had gone to school for the acting, and he found the process of showing up to the set to read other people's lines was not his style.
Yeah, I imagine not.
Yeah. So
as a rock and roll frontman.
Exactly. So one thing did stick with him from his time shooting in the movie was that Damon had fallen in love with Iceland, which is where the filming had taken place.
That's cool. And beautiful.
Oh yeah. And he loved the remoteness, how alone it is. And he decided to move there at the time during the recording of the movie with his girlfriend at the time, Justine. And being in Iceland allowed him to escape all the paparazzi that he just gets swarmed with in London.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah. So in other news about the band, Graham decides to finally sober up around this time, which is right in time for Blur's 5th studio album, Blur, self-titled. Graham was tired of the lack of success in America, so he decided to have the band go through a slight style change, and they drew inspiration from indie American bands. The lead single was Beetlebum. Is that how you would say that?
Yep, I actually like that song.
Really?
Yep.
Which was written about Damon's experiences with heroin. The song would shoot straight to number 1 on the charts. The band was taking a risk with this song because of how different their musical style was. But the record label was scared that it wouldn't appeal to the masses, and they were wrong.
Yeah,
Often can happen that way.
Yeah, that's going to be a theme, I feel like, is record labels not
don't always get it
being
right.
able to, yeah.
No. That's why I said there's no rules. Sometimes you'll be right, sometimes you'll be wrong. Can never predict it.
So,
at least accurately.
The second song on this album. Oh, before I move on though, how crazy is it that the 5th album is the namesake album?
Yeah, that is kind of weird. Although you'll see that, like Dream Theater, I think it was their album came out in 2013. It was their first self-titled album, or their only self-titled album, and it was like, I don't know, their 10th album or something crazy. Like,
yeah.
It's always an interesting choice when someone's like, "This is the one." Like,
yeah, this is the one.
If you haven't had one yet, just keep not doing it. Like, just come up with anything else.
Exactly. And so the second song on the album was originally intended as a joke on the record company. The song is 2 minutes and 22 seconds long,
and it's the second song.
It's the second song on the album, and it's called Song 2, and it would end up hitting number 2 on the charts.
That's insane.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, it's like Sarah Bareilles not going to write you a love song.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing, you know?
So the style of the song was inspired by the Pixies and Nirvana's classic quiet part, loud part, really loud part.
That makes sense.
Style.
That's really funny.
And so the song would finally break through in America. This is, if you think you've never heard Blur,
this is the song you know.
This is the song that you heard. Yeah. That's that song. And
it's the song that you know Blur for. It's the song that I know Blur for.
I always thought it was a Gorillaz song.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. And then I could never find it on the Gorillaz album, so I just thought it was.
That's so crazy that you connected it without even knowing.
Yeah, because I heard I recognized the voice.
Right.
I recognized Damon's voice, and I just really didn't know about Blur until way later in my days of being a Gorillaz fan. And so this song finally broke through in America, reaching number 6 on the US charts, which is huge for Blur.
Yeah.
And
the American charts too.
Exactly. And this song was written in about 30 minutes, given no effort by the band.
Yeah. The cruel irony of being a musician. You pour your heart into a song, nobody gives a shit. You say woo-hoo, would play a couple chords, and it's the biggest thing.
Right.
And it's like, God damn it.
It just solidifies more of how they felt about America.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's this joke song we don't care about. Of course, this is the one the Americans like.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah. So it was on the album like, as an afterthought, like you said, and it would still go on to be featured in commercials. I've seen them. You've seen them. TV shows, stadiums, all kinds of licensing situations, which, by the way, pay very, very well. So,
oh, yeah.
That band probably made them, or that song made them a bunch of money, I'm sure.
It's probably I still hear it to this day.
For sure.
Especially, like I said, at sports stadiums, just the chorus is so good to play. It gets the crowd hyped.
The other one like that, that you don't know until you know is, whoa, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
That's the other one. I think that's Hot Shell Ray.
I wonder how much money Journey has made off of...
Don't Stop Believing. So Don't Stop Believing.
It's finally getting played less, but
that's true. Man. It holds the title, I think it still does, as the number 1 most downloaded song of all time. And I think it'll hold that title forever now because streaming's a thing. Nobody's downloading anything anymore.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's like the biggest selling album of all time is just going to be that because we don't sell albums anymore. Like,
yeah, that makes sense.
There's nothing's going to top it.
Just like a part of history.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah. So the album would go on to be the number 1 selling album in the UK. It would go on to become platinum. And even though it wasn't their greatest selling album in Europe, it was by far their best selling album in America. So that would send Blur on a 9-month tour.
And Blur didn't waste any time recording and releasing their next album, which there's just no break. This reminds me of the Doobie Brothers. Just album tour, and no break.
So this one came out in March 99.
Yeah, so it's just like, even though there's a couple years between, it seems like Damon never stops writing and we'll just have demos and they'll just pick songs, put their album together pretty quickly. And so this album title was 13. and it was definitely one of their sloppier albums. However, it still would hit number 1 on the charts and go platinum. At this point, Blur had just made a name for themselves in the UK. And I was telling you before we went live that just once you have that identity, your album is just going to release number 1 because people are going to see, oh, Blur came out with a new album.
Right, it's like Kanye or something.
I gotta buy it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is. Yeah,
exactly. And so the singles from this album were "Tender," "No Distance Left to Run," and "Music Is My Radar."
The guys cannot name songs.
No.
Naming stuff is not their strong suit.
Never has been, never will be.
Yeah.
And a lot of the inspiration from the album came from Damon and Justine's relationship ending, which would be an important milestone because once Damon and Justine broke up, Damon would move into a flat with longtime friend of the band, Jamie Hewlett.
Remember that name from the beginning? It was a combination of the grueling tour that followed the release of 13 and constant media coverage that made Damon suggest the band take a couple-year break. So during that break, though, Damon wouldn't be taking a break. He'd actually be busier than ever. He would score a few film soundtracks, which is amazing. People were amazed with his attention to detail and his creativity in the writing process. And Damon's creativity and unique music writing is one of the biggest inspirations for creating Gorillaz, not the Gorillaz, with Jamie Hewlett, who we just talked about. Damon had so many rhythms and songs he had written that just would not suit Blur. So with a virtual band to hide behind, Damon was able to let his creativity run free. Such a great idea.
Yeah, right. And real quick, I'll give you some spark notes on Jamie. And then I also want to mention real quick with Damon, as far as all these rhythms and songs that he's written that won't fit into the Blur style. Damon is known for traveling the world and involving himself with different cultures' music, no matter where he goes. Right. And when he's in a place, he usually writes in that style. And so that's why if you listen to Gorillaz, it's just all over the place because he has all these ideas and Blur already had an identity of what it was and what it could be.
You can't, for sure.
And
you can't just throw in a
random
like world music
Jamaican
for
song.
Sure.
Yeah. And so back to Jamie. Jamie is an artist who got a start in a magazine called Deadline, where he and another coworker came up with a comic strip called Tank Girl. I had never heard of it, but if you go and look, it's in the same art style as Gorillaz.
Right.
Because it was Jamie's first project. And Tank Girl became quite popular, actually. And Jamie started working with bands by making album artwork and even turning songs into comic strips, which is really interesting. And Deadline would end up being canceled in 1996, which pushed Jamie a little more into the music scene, kind of full-time working with bands. And that's kind of how he ended up moving in with Damon, just through that world. And then the rest was history.
Yeah. So Damon and Jamie came up with the idea for Gorillaz by watching MTV. Jamie made the remark, quote, "If you watch MTV for too long, it's a bit like hell. There's nothing of substance there." I'm not doing the accent justice. Damon later tells CD Now, quote, "One of the things that really got to us was the nature of celebrity and the cynicism of popular culture. That was really the genesis of Gorillaz. Besides the fact that he's a cartoonist and I'm a musician, so the logical thing to do was create an animated band," end quote. It was this thought that a virtual band would be expanded from.
And so a lot of people talk about MTV being in the heyday back in the 80s.
MTV's what launched Guns N' Roses. Their band came, Appetite came out in 87. Nobody cared. And then in 88, a full year later, MTV picked up Sweet Child of Mine, and that's what made them famous.
So when did MTV really
I guess it would have been around that time. Oh, downhill? I don't know. Probably.
It had to be right after that because they're watching
in the 90s, I guess.
Yeah, they're watching late 90s and saying just everything they put on here is just so hollow. And
nowadays it's just like, Kardashians, like all those kind of shows.
It's so bad now. Yeah. It's gone absolutely to shit. And they recognized this in the late 90s. So almost immediately after it happened, that there was nothing of substance. And so using the recently opened Studio 13, which is where the album 13 for Blur was recorded. This is Damon's studio that he bought.
5150 Van Halen studio. Yeah.
Yeah, so Damon buys the studio and
that's awesome.
He keeps every single instrument or piece of recording equipment that they ever used, and that's that video I was showing you before. That's just they do a full tour of that studio,
Was that in the studio, that video?
Yes.
Same studio to this day?
Yep.
That's really cool.
Really cool place. And so the two would hit the recording studio and put together an EP as well as a music video that would introduce the virtual band. Now, I need to preface, when I mention band members, I'm talking about the virtual band and not Damon and Jamie. I'll try and say we're talking about which band.
Right. This is a really interesting and unique situation.
Yes, it's so hard to...
So the Gorillaz in real life are just Damon and Jamie, right?
Yes.
With guests. But the virtual band has its own story. It has its own, thing going on there.
To the point that Damon isn't even credited for the vocals. Mm-hmm. It's credited to the virtual members. And a couple times Damon is brought up as a backup singer or featured vocals. And in the story of Gorillaz, Damon works with them and is almost their producer. Right.
That's cool.
So it's kind of really cool, So Gorillaz it's hard because the story of the virtual band is told like a nonfiction story. Mm-hmm. It's not, even though it's completely fiction, it's not laid out like that. So it gets so confusing. And that's why the band's videos start to integrate real footage with the cartoons in it.
Right.
The earlier videos are just pure cartoon, and then they end up really transitioning into real life videos, and then they just pluck in the cartoons.
So cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so interesting to go through the entire catalog of music videos, which there's a ton, and they are worth watching. Anybody out there. But before I get on that tangent, let's introduce the band. 2D, the singer, Murdoch Nichols, the bass player and creator of the band, Noodle, the guitarist / most female vocals she's listed for, and my personal favorite, Russell Hobbs, the drummer. And as described by Jamie when he created these characters, 2D is supposed to represent the classic stupid pretty boy singer.
Right.
Murdoch is a heavy metal bass player who wants to be a singer but isn't pretty enough. And he was based on a young Keith Richards. Mm-hmm. And Russell is the hip-hop hard man who is dark, quiet, and thoughtful. And Russell hates Murdoch. Absolutely not a fan. And finally, Noodle is the mysterious one who only says the word noodles.
He's Groot.
Other than singing, I guess. But it's funny, any talking is noodles. And
that's so awesome.
I'm going to dive into their backstory as far as the virtual band's backstory. We're looking at pictures of them on this other monitor.
Up here.
Yeah, that's the new look. They go through a stylistic change in, I believe, 2017.
That's really cool.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Murdoch was born in Stoke-on-Trent.
Do you know who else was born in Stoke-on-Trent?
No.
Slash? Yep.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know he was born in the UK.
I drove through there. Yeah.
That's awesome.
He was born in the UK.
As a kid, Murdoch's father would force him into talent shows for quick and easy money, and this drove Murdoch to vow that he would never take the stage under someone else's circumstances ever again. Mm-hmm. This kind of birthed the rebel inside. So his early musical inspirations were heavy metal and punk rock, like Black Sabbath and The Clash were two of his favorites as a kid, and he drew a ton of inspiration from them. As for Murdoch's look, he is green with the most jacked up nose you'll ever see. It was broken or fractured 8 times during his youth. As for him being green, there's not an explanation in the lore, but Jamie said in an interview that Murdoch was green because is immortal and has existed since the beginning of time. Therefore, his skin is green from rot. Jeez. So you'll see that there
needs a special deodorant,
right? He has to use an entire stick on his whole body. Why
are you green? It's rot.
It's rot.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm gonna stay over here.
Yeah. Dude, that's got to smell awful. So Murdoch started making plans to create a band that would flip the entire world on its head. And the recruitment process began with a singer. Stuart Pott, a.k.a. Stu Pott, a.k.a. 2D, was born in Crawley, Newtown. Growing up, 2D was into film more than music, especially zombie flicks. 2D was quoted saying, "George Romero is my Beatles." So that's his true inspiration. And George Romero produced Dawn of the Dead and also Day of the Dead. And in fact, I didn't know this, but Gorillaz uses samples from the movie scores in the songs M1A1 and the intro for Demon Days.
Oh, cool.
And so it's the in M1A1, it opens up with some music, a little bit of music behind it, but you hear a guy yelling, "Hello, hello," over and over. And then for Demon Days, it's got the do 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 do, which is a theme from the movie Dawn of the Dead. Blew my mind when I discovered. Yeah, I wish I would have found it naturally. I just don't think I ever would have watched the original Day of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead. I've seen the remake, but I've never seen the original until I watched the some clips on YouTube. And God, I wish I would have organically found it. That would have been so sick to be sitting there like, oh my God, I know that sound.
Yeah.
That would have been awesome.
Like if you bought that device he had and you hit play, you're like,
oh,
what?
Dude, yeah, oh, that would have been so nice. But anyways, as a kid, 2D falls out of a tree and lands on his head, causing a total loss of body hair. And when it does finally grow back, it grows that vibrant blue, which is why he has blue hair. And as for his eyes being black, that's all thanks to the fateful encounter between Murdoch and 2D. So part of Murdoch's plan to assemble his dream band was also to steal all the equipment they needed to record demos. Bit of a hooligan. Murdoch puts together a small gang of, I literally say, Murdoch puts together this small gang of hooligans and thieves and just lowlifes, I guess. And knuckleheads. And decides to rob a music store that 2D was working at. And so Murdoch drove the car into the store, and the bumper hits 2D in the head and causes one of his eyes to be pushed inward and fracture, causing the entire eye to turn black. And 2D was also put in sort of a vegetable state. And so Murdoch would be charged with 30,000 hours of community service, as well as becoming the new guardian for 2D, since he was kind of in a vegetable state.
Jeez. That's a lot of community service.
Dude, my throat is throating again.
That's a lot of trash to pick up on the side of the road.
That really is. I'm going to take a sip of water. 1 second.
I'll pick up for you. So as for the other eye, well, that was compliments of Murdoch. Again, this guy just can't get it right. Murdoch wrecks a car with 2D inside, and he's launched out of the front window and lands on his head, damaging his other eye. Poor guy. Can't get a break. Kind of like Blur. Murdoch brings 2D into the band because of his new blue-haired, black-eyed look. Seems like this is all part of his plan. Right. But also because 2D could sing and play keys. But mostly the blue hair, black-eyed look. Right. So Stu Pot became 2D because of the 2 dents where his eyes should be. That rhymes too.
I didn't know that.
Now that a front man had been secured, it's time to find a drummer. So we're going to go drive through some more stores. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. It is not the exact same situation, but it's funny how this one happens as well. So Russell Hobbs was born in Brooklyn, New York. He was considerate and well-spoken. He was also known as a hip-hop savant who was also possessed by some of his dead friends. So Russell was hanging out behind a 7-Eleven when a few of his friends were hit up by a drive-by. All of his friends were killed, except for him, including his closest friend, Dell. And right there, everyone's spirits and souls attached to Russell, and including his closest friend Dell, which you might know from the music video of Clint Eastwood and Rock the House. He's the blue spirit that comes out of his head and does the rapping.
That's awesome.
Also, Dell the Funky Homo Sapien is the name of the artist, and so they name this character after him. And so I actually have a tattoo of that, which I love to death. We'll have to post it on our Instagram.
Yeah, we will.
I should get it finished colored and then post it. But anyways, back to the story. Russell's eyes remain this hazy white because of his constant being under possession. And so Russell flees New York to London for his own safety. And he gets a job at a record store in the Soho area. And Murdoch hears about Russell and decides he needs him in his band, whether Russell wanted to be or not. So Murdoch and 2D visit the store, ask Russell for a record, and as soon as Russell turns his back, Murdoch throws a sack over his head and they abduct him. Along with the aggressive addition of their drummer, they also got Russell's hip-hop machine, which is a giant electronic masterpiece that contains every known beat to man. It also holds the spirits of many dead drummers, therefore it's a very covetable thing to have. And with the drummer of a legendary status secured, there was only one thing left: to replace the guitar player. This is some information.
I want one of those drum boxes.
Me too, dude. Sounds sweet.
Buy that $99.99 on Sweetwater.
Right. I was going to say, what price tag do you put on that? It's inhabited by all the greats. So that's right. Noodle is not the original guitar player, which I had always thought.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Before the band ever recorded any tracks, they had 2D's girlfriend at the time, Paula, on guitar.
Always the singer's girlfriend.
Yep. Murdoch prefers to leave her out of the story, but I wanted to include this little bit. And apparently she showed up to Kong Studios, which is the Gorillaz Studios, and you can see it in some music videos, but which is their first recording. And they also live in every studio that they, it's kind of their house.
That's the way to do it.
Exactly, right? And instead of playing with the band, Murdoch takes her to the bathroom for some extracurricular activities. And Murdoch then steals her purse and kicks her out. And she would never hear from Gorillaz again. And now that Paul is out of the way, enter Noodle. Oh, by the way, 2D was not exactly thrilled with Murdoch.
I would guess not.
Yeah. But Murdoch kind of just says, she wasn't good enough for you anyways.
Yeah, clearly.
What a response. Murdoch, you will find time and time again, Murdoch is always a dick.
Yeah, seems that way.
And so now that Paul is out of the way, enter Noodle, who literally showed up on the doorstep of Kong Studios in this FedEx crate. A small Japanese girl jumps out holding a Les Paul. She spoke some foreign gibberish, then played an incredible riff on guitar, performs a 20-foot high karate jump kick, and then says Noodle. So they call her Noodle, and that is now the
badass
guitar player for...
She's an Avenger, I'm pretty sure.
Dude, I wish I could just get a band member like that. Just a huge FedEx crate, open it, and whatever band member you need. Do you need to order anything?
I need to order
probably a fiddle player now? Banjo?
Fiddle, banjo, let's bring them all in. Yeah. Most of those guys probably live right near me.
Do you think it's on Amazon Prime right now?
Yeah, Prime shipping, 2-day shipping. Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
And so Gorillaz would have their debut in music with Tomorrow Comes Today. And this would release as an EP. Oh. And excuse me, my throat is throating so much today. That could be that could be a term. That could be a term that's taken in a horrible way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, real quick, let's talk about where they got their name.
That's right. So for the band name, Murdoch said musically he wanted to swing through the vines with his bare ass showing. That's his description of
me too.
How they wanted their band to sound.
Yeah.
So the name Gorillaz was perfect.
Someone needs to sit him down and be like, "That's not a sound, dude."
And so the band was formed. You had the brains in Murdoch, the look in 2D, the heart in Russell, and the joy and spirit in Noodle. These are the components of this new group. Real quick, as for the actual naming of Gorillaz, back to Damon and Jamie.
I was gonna say, even his fake people can't name stuff good.
A group. So check it. A group of gorillas is called a band. And
that's awesome.
They call them Gorillaz.
That's amazing.
Right. And
I do like the reasoning for that.
Right.
But still, it's like naming yourself, I don't know, Jaguar. Would actually be kind of cool.
Writes that down as a band name.
Yeah, I'll write that down. So Tomorrow Comes Today. Back to that. The first music video. So this was also the name of the EP that would drop in November of 2000, right after Y2K. And a few months later, in March of 2001, their debut album, self-titled Gorillaz, was released. It was released with 4 singles. The first single released was Clint Eastwood, which peaked at number 4 on the UK charts.
57 in America, which was shocking to me because I feel like it was such a big song. That's probably the number one song if somebody's like, I don't know who Gorillaz is, and you pull up a song and play that one, they're, oh, I know who Gorillaz is. That's kind of like that reaction with that song.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And the second single was 19-2000, which peaked at number 6 in UK charts. And the third single release was Rock the House, which features the same rapper that's in Clint Eastwood, Del the Funky Homo Sapien. That peaked at number 18 on the charts. And the last single was Tomorrow Comes Today. And it was released as the EP and then actually released as a single for the album afterwards, which hit 33 on the chart. And like I said, 2 of these would include the rapper Del the Funky Homo Sapien. And Gorillaz is just known for bringing on nothing but collaborators. And to my surprise, Damon had actually collaborated with Deltron 3030, which is a rap group that Del was part of before Del appeared on the Gorillaz album. So I didn't know that they had already shared some history together, and Del ends up making an appearance on the most recent album to come out.
Right. That makes sense. That's awesome.
So
full circle.
Right. And I talked about this a little bit. One advantage of having the virtual band is Damon can just go crazy experimental with the sound.
Yeah,
you can just do anything
you can hide behind
want.
it like a mask. It's awesome.
Yeah, and so he brought elements of hip hop, reggae, Latin, lo-fi, punk rock. The list goes on and on. You really can't nail Gorillaz down to one genre because of how
You'd have to
different
just
their
say
sound.
like alternative or something.
Yeah,
you know?
alternative is I think what it's listed as. That's the only thing you can list it as.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing is Damon isn't credited to the albums. It's 2D, Murdoch, Noodle, and Russell that are, and also any collaborating musicians will be listed. And of course, he gets the royalties, but
yeah, for sure.
You can't send the money to people that
Murdoch.
don't exist.
Yeah.
So of course, legally, the royalties go to Damon, but he's not actually listed his name as any of the credit.
I just really love how the yard guys are right outside just blowing right, I guess, into the studio.
This happens with so many podcasts I listen to. It's always, of course, yard work's being done at the exact time I decided to
we record once a week. Like, why are they here now?
Right?
Might need to pick a different time. But anyway, if it's not distracting you, it's not distracting to us. So now that Gorillaz is on the scene as a successful virtual band, how on earth do you translate the virtual band to a tour? Got to get creative. Well, that's something that took Damon and company a while to figure out. To start, they just put up a large screen that displayed the virtual band playing, and the actual musicians were playing behind the screen. That sounds awkward to me and for everyone because, as a musician, you want to interact with the crowd, play off their energy. But when you're unable to see the audience, it can really throw everything off. So the first tour was the only tour they would use this setup. In the future, all live shows would include the live musicians' silhouettes center stage with a large screen above that showed the virtual band. They even eventually got a few puppets of the virtual members as well that were used. I would love to see in the future moving towards like, I don't know, holograms or something could be cool.
They use that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
As well.
This was the best solution they could come up with after the initial tour. Unfortunately, none of the tours would really profit because of how expensive it was to put the show on. On a side note, when Damon was putting together the live band, he called up the Clash's ex-bass player Paul Simonon. We saying that right?
I always just say Simonon because
Simonon. That's
the
cooler.
sound is, the name is so close to Paul Simon.
Yeah.
And I just have this hilarious scene in my head where it's actually Paul Simon and he just puts on the cheap glasses with the mustache and it's
I'm Paul Simon Non. The pause.
Yeah.
I'm Paul Simon Non. Wow, you could have done a different name, dude.
I know.
Any two different names.
Anything
It's not
else.
a good undercover name. So
after the first Gorillaz album, Damon would shift his focus back to Blur to help release their seventh studio album, Think Tank, which released May of 2003. This album only features Graham on a few tracks because he decides to take a hiatus during this time, which would last until a reunion show in 2009. And Graham goes on to do some solo work during this time. And like the previous four albums, the album entered the charts at #1 because it's a new Blur album.
Yep.
However, unlike the other albums, the sales for Think Tank didn't have the same longevity. Whereas I said before, they typically
90
trickle in
weeks or something.
sales.
That's crazy.
Yeah, this one did not have that.
Just a quick spike, and they're like, okay, we're good.
Yep.
So the lead single was Out of Time, which reached #5. Not bad. Actually, really good. The next single was Crazy Beat, which hit 18. And the final single was Good Song. I mean, come on.
I know.
Which hit 22. I wrote a song, guys. What are you calling this one? Good song. It's because it's really good. All right.
Man, I feel like they have this bag with a bunch of random words.
Yeah.
And they just pick out two words and that's
Crazy Beat. Okay, cool.
sweet. Moving on.
Or it's like, hey man, what's that song you play the crazy beat on? Dude, that should be the name. Like,
Crazy Beat.
overall, the album was well received, but definitely not an album that stands out from the rest. As for the tour, Blur didn't really enjoy playing without Graham, and because of that, the band itself takes a hiatus until their reunion tour, which would be what, 2009?
2009, yes.
So Blur's kind of done for the moment. So let's get back to Gorillaz.
And now that he could focus more on Gorillaz, it was time to put together the legendary album.
Yep.
Most people at this time thought that the first Gorillaz album was just a big, elaborate prank.
Which makes sense.
That kind of became successful. And so when the next Gorillaz album dropped, it took the world by storm because it was like, I didn't expect them to ever release anything again.
Right.
And this album was produced by Danger Mouse, who entered the charts at number 1 in 4 countries, including the UK, top 5 in another 13 countries, and top 10 in basically the rest of the world, which included the US. The album being, can you guess?
No.
Demon Days. This was my favorite album as a kid.
It's the one I know.
It is the one you know.
Before doing this, it's the one that I knew. Other than, of course, I knew Clint Eastwood, like you said.
Clint Eastwood is that
just the song. Didn't know the album. This is the cover I know. All the song, all that stuff. So
exactly. And so the album would go 6 times platinum in the UK and 2 times platinum in the US. Woo! So over 8 million copies sold. So
safe to say at this point, and maybe even with the first album, Gorillaz have outperformed Blur.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely with this album, but maybe even with the first album? Or was it pretty close at that point?
It was.
And I guess if you're counting the UK as like the main, Blur was big in the UK, like you said. So
yeah, if you combine all of Blur's albums, it definitely outperforms the first Gorillaz album.
That's true.
But this album coming out,
now this kind of solidifies Gorillaz.
This puts up some numbers, and people are now realizing it's not just a prank. This is a band that actually is going to continue to release music.
If it was a prank, it's not bad at all.
Right.
The lead single is the one you've definitely heard. It's called Feel Good Inc. It peaked at number 2 in the UK and 14 in the States. Surprising to me. I thought it'd be higher even.
Me too. I thought it would have been a number 1 because it was everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Still is. The song also won multiple awards, including the 2006 Grammy Award for Best Pop Collaboration with Vocals. Very specific. The second single from the album was Dare. Dare's the only Gorillaz song to hit number 1 on the charts in the UK. Didn't fare nearly as well in the US, only hitting 87. I love how you say only 87. Like I could sit down and write a song to get to the top 100, right?
Right.
The third single released was Dirty Harry, which was originally named I Need a Gun. Nice. It peaked at number 6. Only number 6. Finally, they released a double feature as their 4th single, the song Kids with Guns, which was later re-released by... I'm making a joke here, but I'm bombing it because I don't remember. What's the one with Pumped Up Kicks?
Oh, Pumped Up Kicks.
Was released as a double A-side with El Mañana. So they hit number 27 on the charts.
And the album itself is almost a concept album of sorts. It lays out a world in which the band is surrounded by a post-apocalyptic state. Songs like Kids with Guns, referring to children bringing weapons to school, and Fire Coming Out of a Monkey's Head refers to the oil crisis, which I didn't know that's what that song was about. And what would happen if we mined the oil from the planet, like all of it? Mm-hmm. And that's what that song is about. And Dirty Harry is another Clint Eastwood reference, actually. Dirty Harry is a Clint Eastwood movie.
Right.
And the song hints at the Iraq-Afghanistan war, as well as the music video if you watch it, and the growing fear of violence and chaos in the world. All in all, I have always loved the subject matter behind Gorillaz songs. And my personal shout out on this album is the song November Has Come, which features one of my favorite rappers of all time, MF Doom, which is crazy because it was hard to work with that guy.
Really?
He's just like Gorillaz in the same way that he wears a mask and doesn't seek any personal attention under his actual name. And it was because him and his brother were rappers and his brother died. And so he decided to put on the mask, and I don't know, he never bought into the fame. He was never at parties or anything. He just didn't live that crazy life. But lyrically, he's so awesome. He comes up with some of the craziest rhyme schemes. And here's the first couple lines from the song. I just love this rhyming pattern. Mm-hmm. Slow it down some, no split clown bum. Your gold hits sound dumb, hold it now, crown 'em. Where you found them at, got around town, could have drowned in it, would have floated, bloated, voted, sugar coated, loaded, hip shooter. I just love the constant everything rhyming with everything.
That's the old Eminem thing as well.
Yeah,
there's lots of jokes. I'll show you after this. There's this guy on Instagram that just is like pretending to be Eminem, like if he was at the store. Yeah. And he like makes everything right. It's so funny.
I just love that kind of rhyme. And MF Doom does that all over the place in a lot of his music personally.
By the way, I pulled it up here. It looks like MF Doom passed away Halloween 2020.
He did, which is crazy because
he was not old. He was died 49.
So check it out. He died October 31st, which is right before November Has Come.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that weird? That's the song he did.
That's crazy.
And he died right before November.
I also noticed that looking at the writing credits for the first Gorillaz album, it had just Albarn with some guests. The second one, Demon Days, has Albarn and Hewlett on all of them, and then some guests.
I'm guessing that they didn't really have it
like legally
figured it out with the first one. Almost
True.
as, like we said, not really a prank, but they just kind of put it together
Wouldn't
out
it
of
be
nowhere.
hilarious if we
Exactly. And so they did that, and I don't
then it
think they
blew
were
up. Yeah.
I don't think they were expecting that kind of success. So there was probably a lot more legal stuff behind the scenes going into that
for
album.
this one, yeah, for
as
sure.
far as making sure Hewlett gets his proper royalties, and because he doesn't actually play any instruments, but he was part of the process as far as if Damon wrote a song that Jamie didn't like, he would tell him, give him that criticism, because they were a team.
Yep. So Damon decided to forego a traditional tour after this album, which is surprising. They put on a 5-day show at the Manchester Opera House. This time the band played in front of the screen, but they still had the lighting make the band appear as just silhouettes, while the screen behind them showed the virtual band. Gorillaz also performed the song Feel Good Inc. at the MTV Awards show and had a 3D projection of 2D and Murdoch, like we were talking earlier, on stage, and had the real De La Soul come up and rap. So pretty cool performance that you can find on YouTube.
Yeah, it's really sick. So they so the band is there, and then the holograms are projected on stage with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really sick.
Did it like look good? Came out good? Or was it like
for the times? Yes.
Okay, cool.
I'm sure nowadays you could really put something crazy together. They just don't do it because, like I alluded to earlier, it costs a lot to put on these Gorillaz shows.
Touring with none of that costs a lot. Can't even imagine.
Yeah, so they basically lose money whenever they do tours for Gorillaz.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, maybe not these days, but
at that time it was. So they really had to pick and choose their.
Yeah, touring is crazy expensive.
Yeah, and so after Demon Days, Damon and Jamie worked on an opera called Monkey: Journey to the West, and Damon labeled this as a Gorillaz project, but he claimed that he legally couldn't file it under Gorillaz. And after the opera, the two started working on another Gorillaz project called Carousel. It started as a film project that evolved into a film and stage project. And they wanted to have multiple stories within a larger story with animations and music. And apparently Damon had about 70 songs written for this project.
Wow.
And they end up scrapping it and seamlessly start working on Gorillaz' third album, Plastic Beach.
Very cool.
And Plastic Beach was released in March of 2010. And once again, Gorillaz brings on an impressive list of collaborators for the album. And to name a few, we've got Snoop Dogg, Lou Reed, De La Soul returns, and Bobby Womack.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, you can see an animated version of most of these collaborators in the Melancholy Hill music video, which doesn't happen often because Jamie doesn't always make an animated version in the Gorillaz world for everybody.
Guests. Yeah, for sure.
So at this point, he did make a lot. This is probably the album that has the most animated versions of these artists. And anyways, let's get on to the singles, because I actually love this album too. This came out, our senior year of high school?
2010? That would have been junior year.
Junior year, yeah. I don't think I really listened to this a ton until we were in college.
No, wait. That would have been senior year. Because we would have started senior year 2010 and graduated 2011.
So March 2010 would have been finishing up junior
you're right.
year.
Yeah, March. Yeah,
you're right.
Gotcha.
So I definitely listened to this album a ton in college. But the singles, the first single released was Stylo, which wasn't even able to crack the top 100, and it only hit 103.
That's a cruel joke. Like just 4 more spots and you're in.
Right. And it was well received, though.
What were those 4 songs? I want to know.
I know, right? I can't believe that one didn't chart higher. I love this song.
Yeah.
And the music video is really awesome. It has 2D Murdoch and a robot noodle, which is all the story. I was going to keep up with the story of the actual virtual band, but they do a rewriting about halfway through, and it makes things a little confusing. So I decided to not go full in depth. But at this point, they have a robotic noodle because the actual noodle is missing at the time, and Murdoch still wanted to record music, so he built a robot.
Okay.
And so they're in this car, and Bruce Willis is in a car chase chasing them. He's a hired bounty hunter, shooting at them, chasing them, trying to take them out. Interesting music video, to say the least. And the second single, Super Fast Jellyfish, charted number 28 on the UK dance charts, but it wouldn't make the Billboard Top 100. And the third and final single, On Melancholy Hill, which I alluded to earlier, hit number 78 on the charts. And as for the album itself, it entered the charts at number 2 in the UK and the US.
That's wild.
So the album itself did really well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And Plastic Beach is one of my personal favorites. The album is centered around pollution, but it has some other themes. So Super Fast Jellyfish is about the fast food industry and all its woes, which might not be pollution on Earth, but it's pollution of the body, I'd say.
Yeah.
And the song Plastic Beach is about the pollution in the oceans and overflowing landfills. And one more song that doesn't really talk about pollution, but still has a cool message is Some Kind of Nature, which has Lou Reed. Mm-hmm. Which I really like the vocals on that song. It's very almost robotic sounding.
Yeah.
It's an interesting song. You got to give it a listen. But
Reed's credited as a songwriter as well. A lot of these guests are credited as songwriters, which that's not always the case.
Yeah. So Damon had sent Lou a couple of songs and Lou had turned them down over and over and over again. And then he finally liked the idea for this one. And he actually died only a couple years after this song was written. But this song is about the artificial environments that humans build around themselves to feel safe and feel like we belong in the world we live in. So really cool idea there. And I didn't know that the singles didn't chart as well until I was doing this research. Mainly because when I discovered the album, I was a big Gorillaz fan already. So when I heard this album, I was just blown away. It was so awesome. Me and my brother really enjoyed this album. I'd say this one, Plastic Beach, is probably Braden's favorite. Yeah, for sure. His number one. And so that was always something we had in common. Maybe that's why I hold on so close to this album. Yeah, but you think though, albums you like or discover or whatever that you really get into, we have the tendency to think like, oh, everyone likes them, or everyone knows it. And then you look and like you said, you do the research, you're like, oh, wait, like it only charted, out of the 100, whatever, so it's like not always the case, for sure. Yeah, I just have emotional attachment to it. Yeah, for sure. So we have another album to touch on that was released to the Gorillaz fan club members in 2010. So it's same year. So it came out 2010 is when Plastic Beach came out, and to the Gorillaz fan club members, this other album came out in 2010, and then to the public in 2011. That album being The Fall, and it's extremely unique because Damon recorded it on the Plastic Beach tour on an iPad. Wow. And you heard me correctly. Just an iPad and a couple of basic instruments, and he put this little album together. And it was praised for its uniqueness, but it really lacks the classic Gorillaz sound. It's definitely the most overshadowed album by far. I couldn't name a single song from it if you were to ask me, and I've heard the album about 2 or 3 times. It definitely, you can tell, was written on an iPad. As far as just not being very dynamic musically. Yeah. And like I said, I agree with it's so unique. And it's one of those you probably have to just be a huge Gorillaz fan. And if anybody ever tells you The Fall is their favorite, they don't know anything about music. I hate to say it. They're just being artsy or hipster. It's an easily forgettable album. I hate to say it. As big of Gorillaz fan as I am. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. And because it was just him, there's no collaborations on it. You know what I mean? I don't believe. Yeah, what's interesting, well, Bobby Womack's featuring on one, but that's right. What's interesting here is the track listing. It lists the tracks, right, normal, and then where we would usually see songwriter information and things like that, it just says recorded, so it has the date it's recorded. In the city. And Damon basically said it was like a audio diary on the road. He didn't have anything written ahead of time. He would just start writing on the road, and this is what he came up with. So. Yeah, iPads and certain technologies like that do make that a lot easier than, Yeah, that is true. It used to be, for sure. That'd be impossible. He says iPad. I wonder if he went as specific to do anything on GarageBand. Yeah, who knows? Who knows what he actually ended up doing, but... So, after these 2 albums, Damon and Jamie kind of have a bit of a falling out. He told the media that further Gorillaz projects were highly unlikely, and tension had been building between the two, especially during the Plastic Beach tour. Jamie just felt like his contributions were being overshadowed, and Damon was filling the stage with people like Bobby Womack and half the members of The Clash and Lou Reed, De La Soul. So not only were were these collaborators on the recording studio, but they were actually touring
Right.
with Gorillaz, and he was bringing on all these just huge names. And so Jamie felt like that the screen with the virtual band, you know, his baby in the you know, his half of the art was just getting overshadowed and becoming smaller and smaller, and it was, you know, he just felt like the virtual band was not the main point,
Right.
and all these incredible artists were overshadowing. And so yeah, he just kind of wanted to step back. And
I mean, I see his point, but I also see the point of like, if you bought a ticket to the Gorillaz and knew like all these people, you know, members of the Clash, Lou Reed, De La Soul, all these people were going to be on stage and they were just silhouettes, and you were looking at a screen, you would be like, what the fuck did I pay $80? You know, like,
right?
Are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah, no,
because
like
you don't have the intimate knowledge that Jamie has. You don't understand the Gorillaz. You just know, I heard this music, and when I hear music, I go see it live and I see the guy play it. You know, you don't know the story when you're just driving down the road and it comes on the radio and you're like, I like this song. Like, you don't know any of that.
Yeah. So
if you were to go to the show, not knowing any of that, and all the people are blacked out, you're like, wait a second. Like, I mean, and you might like it, but you might not. You know, could go either way.
I've never been to see Gorillaz, but I just know that
would be really
I would
cool.
go to see them with zero expectations.
I feel like it'd be kind of like Tool, where it's like very visual. Obviously very visual.
Obviously, yeah.
Different than Tool, obviously, as well, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure.
So, during the Gorillaz break.
Yep. So Damon records a solo album called Everyday Robots, and recorded another album with Blur during this time.
Yeah.
The Magic Whip.
The guy's prolific. You can't fault that. He's always coming out with stuff. That's awesome.
He's never not doing something musically. And before doing this podcast, I didn't know a lot about Blur, but I had seen the album cover of The Magic Whip, which was the only thing I associated in my brain with Blur, was this album cover.
Yeah.
And
we were just listening to that before too.
Yep. And so I don't know why or where I saw it as a kid, or somewhere along the way I saw that album cover, and I always just was like,
the neon
Blur.
ice cream cone.
Yep.
Yeah.
The neon ice cream cone. So anyways, that was Blur's 8th studio album, and it was released April of 2015. And
nice. We're starting to get into the modern day here.
Yeah, and so the album entered the charts at number 1 in the UK. Go figure.
Wow.
Like
and at that point, it had been a minute too, so it was kind of like,
been a while.
Blur, let's check it out. You know.
Yeah, they had done that reunion tour in 2009, but that was just a tour, so they hadn't actually released anything since 2003, I believe.
That's awesome.
And so the lead single "Go Out" didn't chart, but the album did pretty well as far as reviews.
Critically, yeah.
Yeah, and I like the story of how the album was made. So in 2013, Blur was supposed to play a show in Hong Kong, or in Tokyo. Japan's Tokyo Rock Music Festival is the actual title. But the show was canceled last minute, and it left Blur stranded in Hong Kong. And not wanting to just sit around and do nothing, the band decided to write some new material while over there, which is why there are Chinese themes throughout the entire album, and even the artwork. The ice cream cone has Chinese letters. And so after the band returned home, Damon went to work on his solo album, and then the rest of the band, Graham, Alex, and Dave, secretly kept working on the songs that they had kind of put together in Hong Kong and developed them enough. And they showed Damon, and Damon was on board, so they hit the recording studio, and
that's
album
awesome.
8 was born.
So a little more collaborative, it seems like.
Yeah, for sure. So Damon kind of wasn't as included in the... Well, he was for the initial parts of the songs until they, ironed them out. And so while on tour, Damon had continued to write songs for Gorillaz while he was working with doing tour for Blur. He just never stopped writing those songs that couldn't fit in with Blur.
Right.
And one particular after party, after one of his solo album shows, I believe, he talked with Jamie and asked him if he wanted to make another Gorillaz album, and the two agreed. And Jamie started relearning how to draw the characters, and Damon started organizing songs for the new album. And this is why I told you they go through his art change,
right? Because he had to kind of like, oh, what? Like, how did I do? yeah.
So they get
it's been a few years.
Mm-hmm. And so recording began in late 2015 as well as into 2016, and the album was written to be a soundtrack for a party for the end of the world. So Damon wrote the album imagining a world where Donald Trump wins the 2016 election. This is before the election was done.
Right. Hilarious.
And at the time, this is when Donald had like early announced. So it like his odds of winning were extremely low.
Right.
You know, and so it's kind of funny that Donald goes on to win.
Yeah.
It's like Damon was in shock. So
it's kind of like Damon himself.
Right.
Polling very low, went on to win.
And so the new album, Humans, with a Z, was released in April of 2017.
Yep.
And the album entered the charts at number 2 in the UK and the US.
Number 2 again for both.
Number 2.
Who's number 1? We're looking it up right now. While you continue on, I have to know.
You have to know who they keep losing to.
April 2017.
Number 1 on the charts. But in classic Gorillaz fashion, they brought a ton of collaborators. And how do you stay fresh and relevant? Just keep including a bunch of successful musicians in your album. So continuously bring in tons of artists that are making music that's relevant. And it's awesome that Gorillaz gives these artists like another platform to get their name out other than their own solo stuff.
Real quick, while I look this up, did we have a week? Did we know what week this was? I mean, I could look that up. I don't need you to tell me. I'll figure it out. Carry on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Just April is all I know.
28th April.
28th of April. So the very last week.
The Chainsmokers had them beat out.
The Chainsmokers did.
Yeah, with Memories Do Not Open. But just to put this in perspective of what else was going on, a couple weeks before Ed Sheeran's Divided By came out. That's a big one. Drake.
Right after
Kendrick Lamar.
I love that album.
Other things. Logic, Harry Styles, Linkin Park, Bryce Tiller. We're moving on through the year. So what's really interesting to me is when you look at and around my birthday, December, Taylor Swift's Reputation comes out. When you go through a list like this, as a quick side note, we're looking at the list of Billboard 200 number 1 albums of 2017. You could scroll through and see kind of, the vibe of the year, right?
Yeah.
But you don't see any of the number 2s, the number 3s, the number 5. You don't see all this other stuff. So if you didn't make number 1, you're almost buried in a way.
Yeah. It's crazy is that?
It's like number 1 is it and everything else, like number 2. And these guys hit number 2. It's like, gone.
Yeah.
Not gone. You know what I mean? But if you're just looking at it from a number 1 perspective, it's like, wow.
So this album had 9 singles.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which is almost every song on the album.
Yeah. So speed run it here.
Yeah. So only 2 singles were able to break into the top 100, or in the UK, which was Saturn Bars at 87 and Ascension, which hit 91. And the rest of the singles were able to break into the hot rock song charts, but not the Billboard Top 100. So these would include We Got the Power hitting 13, Andromeda hitting 9, Let Me Out, which hit 7, The Apprentice hit 18, Strobe Light hit 22.
Apprentice got to be a direct reference to Donald Trump. Also, the one you said, We Got the Power, we were talking about Oasis. That was co-written by Noel Gallagher.
I like that song.
Also, the writers, I'm looking at the writing credits here, they're simply listed as Gorillaz.
Yeah.
That can't be... There has to be more to it than that. That wouldn't hold up. Like, who are we making the Gorillaz? Do we make the check out to Gorillaz?
Yeah, I think we need to have maybe a music lawyer break down some of the backstory of all of these kind of things.
For sure. That would be a really good episode, actually.
It's interesting. So
sorry, but The Apprentice hit 18, Strobe Light hit 22.
And then 2 singles released for the deluxe edition that did not chart, Garage Palace and Andromeda, Dram Special. So there's 2 versions of that song. And the album was definitely shocking when it came out because it sounded so different from the previous 3 Gorillaz albums.
Really?
It was way more pop, way more modern with the beats, and the collaborators were... I don't know.
There's a lot more.
A lot more of them.
They had a lot of them before, but this is like every single song.
Yeah, and they were grabbing people from all kinds of different genres.
Yeah.
And they brought in De La Soul, who comes in and like every single album, actually, I believe.
Yeah.
I think has a spot. But I remember not liking it initially. It just that changes when you hear a band that you love and they come out with an album and their sound is so different. At first, you want that old classic sound, but as I listened, it definitely grew on me, and I started to like the new sound Gorillaz had come into, and that's how most of the new Gorillaz albums are going forward. And so I remember talking with my brother after Humans released, and we were just kind of like, You know,
man,
like, yeah, we couldn't really figure out how we felt about it. And now I definitely can go back and jam to that album. And this kicks off like this new modern iteration of Gorillaz where they start releasing an album just about every other year. So they definitely increase production. And I mean, that's because Damon never stops writing for Gorillaz.
Right.
Like I said, throughout, even when they're taking a break, he's just constantly always writing Gorillaz songs.
Right.
And I'm sure as of right now, he's probably got hundreds just on file, even to this day, just on the back burner. And so anyways, Gorillaz would release their 5th studio album, The Now, just 1 year later in June of 2018, which was only a few months after finishing up the Humans tour. So right into recording a new one. And recording finished quickly at the end of 2017 to try and create some new material for future tour dates. And Damon had so much fun writing Humans that he just seamlessly wrote another album while he was on tour.
Yeah.
And the album entered the charts at number 5. And the singles that came along with it were Humility, Lake Zurich.
That's a place in North Chicago, basically. Foz, my drummer, took drum lessons there.
Sorcerers, Fireflies. Yeah, Sorcerers with a Z.
Fireflies with an S.
That's just like the Gorillaz thing, right?
Yeah.
And Hollywood and Trans. Humility was the only song to chart on the Billboard Top 100, hitting 81 in the UK and 85 in the US. And the song came along with a really cool music video. Features 2D riding around Venice Beach on roller skates and includes Jack Black playing guitar in the background.
And just generally being Jack Black.
Being Jack Black. Yeah. No vocals, just Jack Blacking all over the place. And as for the other singles, they didn't hit the Billboard 100, but once again, charted on the hot rock songs, which is kind of where a lot of the songs end up charting. And Lake Zurich hit 35, Sorcerers hit 36, Fireflies hitting 32, Hollywood hitting 26, and Trans hit 16. And this album has the more classic Gorillaz sound that we had been missing from Humans. And
it's
I remember,
funny because we said earlier you can't really pinpoint their sound, but they do have their sound, you know.
But during this period, this is the transition of sound. So in that transition era, in the time, in the moment, you're like, oh, this is weird. But
that's how it always is, man.
Yeah, at that time. But now I can look back and appreciate the growth.
Yeah, for sure.
That the band showed. And
it takes guts, you know.
So I know I haven't been keeping up with the actual story of the virtual band, like I alluded to earlier. It's just, it's so much.
It's like a whole thing. It's like a separate, Yeah.
And so during the break, when they come back with Humans, not only do they come back with this new art style, but they also get some backstory rewritten. And so some of the story that's written now doesn't line up or overlap with some of the old story. So that's why I decided to not continue that storyline. It was just going to get all over the place. And we can link a video that I watched on YouTube that sums it up pretty good. It goes through the original story and then it goes through the new story, and then you can pick and choose what you like and whatnot. But one thing that I thought was extremely cool was during the Now, Murdoch is taking a hiatus from the band and was replaced with Ace, the leader of Gang Green from the Powerpuff Girls series. What a crazy crossover. Like one of the coolest crossovers of all time, in my opinion. And he's in the video for Humility with Jack Black. He pops a basketball. And
we're looking up pictures now.
Yeah, he's just being a menace. Look at that guy. How That's crazy funny. Is that? I wonder, Jamie must have been friends with the animator for Powerpuff Girls to be able to use the character.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't actually know the backstory of how he was able to get away with that, but gangrene. Oh, God.
Yeah, I put that together because I was like, gangrene is a disease or something.
Yes, it's
the death of tissues and part of the body. Foul-smelling death. Yeah, so that's obviously a play on it. Gangrene.
Yep.
Gangrene. So
and
we definitely don't recommend Google imaging that. That was a lot.
That was too much for me.
That was one click. We're like, oh no.
Right.
But that's a funny little play there.
So they just replaced one green guy with the next.
Yeah. There we go.
And so
looking for green guy. There's only one. Like, all right, I'll do it.
And so the next album was released in an interesting way. In January of 2020, Gorillaz released a short video introducing a new concept called Song Machine. Basically, instead of an album, Damon wanted to release a song as a music video, and episode style.
This guy is just like a tornado of creativity.
Yeah.
Everything he does, every time he opens his mouth, it's like some new idea. It's like, whoa, dude, you're like changing the game every time here. Like,
so every month a new Gorillaz song would come out in the form of a music video, and it would be
that's cool.
Aired on streaming
services.
Aired on streaming services and posted on their YouTube, and it would come out as an episode. So it had this little ditty, and it would say "Song Machine," and it had a little doot 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 thing.
That's fun.
And so it would go down into the music video. And so because of this, every single song was released as a single in a way. And so instead of going through the chart info, I just wanted to highlight a few things from the album. And first, they collaborated with I'd have to say their biggest musician yet. Their biggest collaboration, Sir Elton John, showing up in this one.
That'll do it.
Yeah, it will. And Elton, and I believe it's pronounced Black, but it's got a 6 instead of a B.
Yeah.
And I think that's his name. And they're both featured on the song The Pink Phantom, which is such a cool song because it's like this mashup of Damon's vocals with Elton's vocals, and then you have this hip hop, black vocals mixed in there.
And we'll have to do an episode on Elton John at some point. But first of all, what a legendary career. But second of all, later in his career, Stevie Wonder as well. They both did not shy away from crazy like features and collaborations.
Yeah,
it was Elton John, I think, collaborated with like Eminem, like all sorts of people. Yeah.
Yep.
And Stevie Wonder was with Ariana Grande on the movie Sing, and lots of other stuff, of course. But they're just they're always, and I don't know if that's them just trying to stay relevant or if they're really just, creative force, or if they really like these people. What, I don't know why, but it's cool.
Yeah, I like that. I was pretty shocked when it came out and I saw Elton John on there. I was like, oh my gosh.
Also, another fun fact you might not know, Alice in Chains 2009 album, Black Gives Way to Blue, was the first album they released after Lane died. It was several years after. Mm-hmm. It has Check My Brain, the song?
Yeah.
And the last song on it is called Black Gives Way to Blue, and it's Elton John playing the piano on that.
Oh, really?
So that's pretty cool. There's a piano, you can find it somewhere. It's a piano version of it, where the piano is really like the main thing, because the main mix of the song is, the piano's kind of buried a little bit, and Elton doesn't sing, I don't think. So it's kind of a fun little thing there. That's a side note.
Yeah. So my favorite song is actually Desolé.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Good
featured...
luck.
Yeah.
Good luck pronouncing this name.
I'm just going to go ahead and let you guys know I cannot pronounce the name, but...
Fatoumata Diawara.
That was better than I was going to do.
I feel like I'm summoning a demon.
She's from West Africa, and she just sings with this unique accent and sound in her voice. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
She's got such a good tone.
Mm-hmm. Just don't say her name out loud 3 times. just don't do it.
I can't.
We can't. We physically can't.
This was definitely my favorite of the newer albums that have come out in the newer series. It's
interesting the way they did it too. That's really cool. And if we look here at the writer credits, the producer credits, much more robust. And I don't know if that's because, who knows if Wikipedia is right, but I don't know if this is because they're actually listing them all out and it's always been this robust, or if this one is truly more collaborative. But
yeah,
either way. So now we're up to this year, the year we're recording this, 2023. And it was a busy one for Damon. If you hadn't guessed already, it was.
Yeah.
He has not had a busy year ever. So not only did a Gorillaz album drop, but a new Blur album as well. So another Blur reunion. This guy just can't stop. I'll briefly talk about the Blur album, but then maybe you can get more into the Gorillaz album. So Blur's 9th studio album, The Ballad of Darren, came out in July of this year. At the time of recording, it's November 2023. So the band, just a couple months ago, the band did a reunion show in late 2022 and decided to hit the studio afterwards. So like so many albums that previously, it's still decades later hitting the UK charts at number 1. But in usual Blur fashion, it only hit 94 in the US. The lead single, The Narcissist, peaked at number 81 in the UK. The album was well received with critics as well. All the members are in their mid-50s nowadays, so they themed the album and most of the songs with reflection on their lives. And, we always like seeing bands come together years later and make albums. Sometimes they're not so great, but it's still fun to see. Mm-hmm. So they're currently on tour, actually, as we speak. So get out there and see them if you love yourself some Britpop, some legends of Britpop.
It's funny that both these episodes...
just fun to say.
The Doobie Brothers also just released an album. So it's funny that these episodes we're doing have people releasing music even to this day, even though these groups have been around, been making music for a while.
Might need an update at some point.
Right? I was thinking that.
If Damon's involved.
Yeah, he's going to
next week. I got 4 albums coming out, and then after that, 10.
Yeah, he's going to be part of music forever.
Yeah, I love that.
So finally, let's get into that Gorillaz album we mentioned, Cracker Island.
Cracker Island.
A few songs that made the album
pretty sure
were originally going to be used for Song Machine Season 2, but the Song Machine project was shelved for the time being.
I was going to say, it seemed like...
in favor of a more traditional style album. So we could still see Song Machine 2 come out, but as of right now, it's on the shelf. And once again, they have just all kinds of incredible artists that they collaborate with. He brought Stevie Nicks and Bad Bunny. I don't know if I was going to say, I don't know if you're familiar, but internationally, his name is massive. And the deluxe edition brings in Del the Funky Homo Sapien and De La Soul, who De La Soul's been on like every album, but Del hadn't been on an album in a while. Although he had been, I believe he has some writing credit on some songs with
on here
Damon, just throughout the time. I saw his name pop up.
Yeah, they write it. Yeah, for
as
sure.
As far as a writer,
sure.
but not necessarily vocals.
Right.
It seems like him and Damon are just buddies.
It seems that way.
Just
for
like
sure.
to hang out in the
collaborators.
studio.
Yeah. Creative forces.
So Cracker Island hit the charts on fire, reaching #1 in the UK and #3 in the US.
That's impressive still to this day. Like that's crazy. That was a couple months ago.
Right? Yeah. It came with 5 singles, Cracker Island being the first, and it would chart at number 94 in the UK. And the second single, New Gold, hit 56 in the UK and just missed out on the top 100 in the US at 104. The third single, Baby Queen, which didn't chart. And the fourth single was Skinny Ape, which also didn't chart. And it's crazy that the songs themselves don't chart very well, but the album charted.
That tells you the power of the name, I think.
I think
Not
so
necessarily
too.
Power of the music, power of the name.
Power of the name. And the fifth and final single is Silent Running. Such a good song, which didn't chart for some reason.
Yeah. People suck.
People do suck.
No, Taylor Swift's probably releasing an album a week, so
yeah, that's
going to hurt everyone in the music industry.
It's not a good time to try and outdo pop right now, which this album is a pure pop album.
Interesting.
So it definitely stands out more so from the recent stuff as way more focused on pop. And which hurt my feelings on the songs not charting, because couple of these are like really, really good. Especially Silent Running is my favorite on the album, and shocking that it didn't chart. But
I think a running theme. Also, I think charting isn't everything, for starters. But I think I forgot what I was gonna say.
I am so sorry. I gave him
it'll hit right as soon as you start talking again, it'll pop right back into me. And then I'll have to interrupt.
Yeah, but overall the album was well received.
Yeah.
Based on, especially due to the charts, and that actually catches us up to current times. They just finished, Gorillaz just finished up touring. It was an international tour.
Did you see any clips or anything?
I didn't look it up.
I'm wondering what they're doing,
because I was actually going to look
visually.
and see if there were any visually.
Yeah.
I think they're just playing in front of the screen, but they're not silhouettes anymore.
AI kind of cracks open potential for Gorillaz
AI
as well.
could go crazy.
Some really,
for
really cool stuff.
I was looking because I wanted to see if there were any shows I could go to, and they were all sold out when I had originally looked.
Where's the closest they came? We're based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, for people wondering.
I think there were only 2 cities
Atlanta,
in America,
probably.
and I'm trying to remember.
Only 2 in America.
Yeah,
it was probably like New York and LA.
Yeah, it was
Nashville, maybe
close.
Something. Yeah,
and yeah, I just know that most of them were Japan, Brazil, UK. So they had a ton of
but it's a global band for sure.
Yeah, I think they played in like Dubai. I think for one of them. It's just huge cities around the world, and not really much America. But that's okay. I might get an opportunity someday.
Yeah, I'm sure. So that brings us to our ratings. So we have 2 separate ratings for this episode. We have Blur ratings and Gorillaz ratings. So I get spoiled here. I get to see Ashton's before you guys know them. He does not get to see mine because didn't write them down yet. So
yeah,
everyone gets surprised.
And I'm still on the fence with how to judge Blur.
Yeah,
I have them. I have them at a 3 out of 5, but I'd probably more honestly and realistically be closer to a 2.5.
I was going to say, for me, I'm going to go 2 out of 5.
2 out of 5? Yeah.
Yeah, no. And we talked about this before we recorded, or maybe at the top. I don't know. This has been a long episode, but it's just really hard to quantify something so subjective. Like if you ask me why a 2, why not a 2.5? Like I'd be like, well, I don't know. Like just the number I chose. So, but for me, the things I think about when I'm coming up with a rating is, how often would I want to go put them on and listen to them? Not very often for Blur.
And that's
for me.
That's what lowers my score.
How well do I know them? If I'm going through the album, when I'm listening, how many times are my ears perking up and I'm going, whoa, let's go back. Let's listen to that again. None for Blur, I'm not going to give them a 1. How impactful were they on the scene? How impactful were they on music as a whole? Like there's no impact here. They charted number 1 every time, so that is in their favor. How creative are they? How many, there's all sorts of different things I'm thinking of. But for Blur, for me, I'm never going to put on Blur. I was not super familiar with them, but I'm not taking away anything from anyone who is, or, it's a lot of people's favorite band, I'm sure. It's just not my type of thing so much. So that's why I landed on a 2.
That's why I was also in that hard to land. And in my opinion, the albums do get better as you go. Britpop, not my style. So their early couple of albums are pretty hard for me to listen to. Especially since, I didn't even mention this. This is going to give you a great kick. Their early inspirations, they love Pink Floyd, but specifically Syd Barrett.
Of course.
Yep.
Of course, they're the hipsters. Yeah.
So they like the Syd Barrett style, which I'm a huge Pink Floyd nut, and I can't stand their first album, which was basically Syd Barrett at the helm.
Yeah.
And so
it's weird. Was he Animals? Was that him?
No. It was
out
just
by then?
Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
The very first one.
Yeah, the very first album. And then I think he was on a couple of... Yes.
Yeah.
A couple of songs on the second album before he went...
Nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll say it like that. So,
all right. So Gorillaz ratings.
Gorillaz ratings, of course, I'm going to be pretty high on. And
they're one of your favorites.
They are one of my favorites. Definitely a top 5 for me. And so I'm going to give them a 4.5 out of 5. And
nice.
That's just to look at them collectively as a whole. There are albums and songs I definitely am not the biggest fan of.
Right.
But there are also some songs and albums that are just going to be in my heart forever. And more realistically, I could be a 4 out of 5, but that emotional connection I have, having a tattoo, having one of the biggest bands I have in common with my brother, and just the evolution of their music, all the collaborators, and listening to their sound as they've gone through the years, and being able to be so fresh and relevant, just being all over the place with the genre. You can just, they really are a very timeless band.
Yeah, for sure. I'm coming in at a 3 out of 5, and I'll tell you why. They're not a band I go to listen to ever. It's not because I don't like it. It's just because I don't ever listen to it. I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of music these days, which is kind of weird because I play music so much. Music's my profession. I have to listen and learn so much music on a weekly basis that I have, like, the time I have to listen to music is almost scheduled. Like, okay, well, I have this much time and I have to listen to these songs that I have to play, and like learn and all this stuff for certain things. But it's not a band I'm going to for that. But with I'm in awe of their creativity and what they've done and stuff like that. So I'm giving them a nice solid middle of the road 3 for me.
I'm surprised that's higher than I thought you'd give them.
Yeah, well, you got to factor in, the things that I do love about them, which is that, like I said, that creativity and all that stuff. Like the music itself, just not for me. It's just not. But, if I were to play a song without knowing any of the other stuff, I'd just be like, okay, cool, next, But for all that other stuff, I think that has to be a factor for sure. So that's where I stand on that one. So that's going to wrap up our episode 2 on the Gorillaz. Just kidding, Gorillaz. But
Gorillaz.
Did you learn nothing?
Blurry Gorillaz.
But we wanted to remind you guys, please take a second, support us by giving us a thumbs up on YouTube, subscribe, comment, heart, all the good stuff on all the socials. Most importantly, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please take a second, leave us a 5-star rating, drop us a review. And we might have some rewards for those of you that do that in the future. So please take a second to give us that review on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us grow the show faster. Until next time, I'm Dallas Dwight. Anything to add?
I'm Ashton, and catch us on the next episode for the largest, biggest pop star ever. Taylor Swift.
We'll see you guys then.